Bash. All right. Still. All right. Okay. X does not like me. I'm gonna go remove that and save. All right. We are live. I am live with the one, the only, and awesome creator here, Aaron from Re-Education. I'm going to get another education that I didn't get before. He makes great anarcho-communist content, very insightful. Been watching him for about a year now, and we're finally getting to talking. He also has an awesome flag behind him, go Black Flag. So, Aaron, if you want to introduce yourself.
Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on, Kareem. Yeah, like you said, my name is Aaron. I host the show Re-Education. We're on tons of different platforms: Red Note, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Pretty much find me anywhere. And lately, I've been doing short form content. In the past, I did long form content, and I'm an activist, educator, and anarchist. So yeah, and the black flag is just it's my shop flag. I'm in my shop today working on a little project. So yeah, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's awesome that you're doing that. Hey, the working class people have to stick together and potentially run their own businesses. So, yeah, as people know, I'm Kareem, host of the Essential Libertarians. My goal, as I started out, was I was initially an ANCAP, looked into leftist literature, decided, hey, I like all of it, even some of the crazy ideas, because at the end of the day, you're not oppressing your neighbor. So if we can get that and we can decentralize things and work from the bottom up, I think there's potential there. But I really liked your content because there were things missing from the, I guess, ANCAP framework to me. One was, how do we organize? I could never figure that out because they're like, okay. And then what's funny is, I'll give you some insight. The Libertarian Party, to vote on things, gets together they get delegates from different states. So they're confederating, even though I
Mm-hmm.
know that word has been polluted by what happened with Lincoln and that, but they confederate, they get groups of people to confederate. Then then they say, hey, and there's people who will pick up the phone and call, what policies or planks are you voting on? This, and this. And there's no intermediary. There's people who count votes. But what's funny is we're voting directly. So there's direct democracy there. We're confederating using direct democracy, and then we're voting on generally people who are recallable delegates. And then they go out and we're voting on, planks and stuff like that. So really, I came to the thing. I watched your video on democratic confederalism. I've been watching what's going on in Rojava with the Zapatistas, and I realized something. I'm like, hey, this is actually a great way to organize. Now, I'm of the mentality that there's different anarchists or different people. We can work together as long as somebody's not trying to coerce someone. Now, there are problems like you brought up, um, Javier Milei, or also the authoritarians, the tankies, who say, like, I'm an anarchist, but I want this unjustified hierarchy here. So I would say anarchists can work together if there's nobody who just says, hey, I have a magical hierarchy position like in Monty Python. Or as to put it, as Thought Slime said, love that quote from your video, an anarchist believes that authority does not justify itself and must
Mm-hmm.
meet the burden of proof to provide that is both more morally ethical and needed, or otherwise be dismantled and replaced with a more egalitarian alternative, which just means equal respect for the viewers, because some people think egalitarianism means exactly equal, which doesn't make sense. You're better at construction work than I am, and I might be better at something that, but Bakunin makes a good point. You can have naturally, you can have mastery of authority, but that's only temporary. Like the pilot doesn't enslave you; it just gets you point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'll start off with. Is I think it's possible, like we were talking. Can we have anarchists working together? Yes. Does anarcho-capitalism sometimes play out in some bad ways? I think, yeah, it does. But also, I think every anarchist version can have a bad off ramp. You can get primitivists like, Teddy K. you can get anarchists thing where you say, I'm an anarcho-capitalist president, but they don't give up power. So, and you can also get in potential ANCOM situations, people who like, well, like the CNTFAI, great with everything, but they worked with the UGC and the Marxists screwed them. And then when Francisco Franco came around, as far as I'm concerned, they got taken over because they worked with Marxists. And Marxists care ultimately about power, whereas ANCOMs, syndicalists, and mutualists care about cooperation in non-hierarchical structures. So I'll get your thoughts on that because I went through a lot.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I have a lot of thoughts about that, right? Like we were saying just before the show, I don't necessarily think that it's impossible to work with somebody that you're opposed to ideologically. Like you brought up the CNT. I think that that's an example of where it didn't work necessarily in favor of the anarchists specifically. And then there's also other examples where sometimes working with your opponent, for lack of a better term, does work, right? For instance, there was the situation with the nationalists in China, which I was saying before, where the communists and the nationalists kind of tepidly sort of worked together to defeat Japan. But unfortunately, at the end of that, the authoritarian communists and Mao ended up, well, not unfortunately, I'll take my judgment out of that entirely. It's not my thing. It's a history thing. But they ended up taking the nationalists out at the very end and forcing them onto a little island. Right. So do I think that strategically sometimes you can work with your opponent? Yeah, I think that is possible. Are anarchists of different stripes necessarily always opponents? No, I don't think that they are. I think that it, just like with all anarchist factions or anarchist individuals, every single person is going to be different. Every single belief that a person has that's an anarchist is going to be a little different from the other. So can we work with some mutualists? Well, I think mutualists aren't that bad, like for the most part. I have a lot of agreements with them. I have some disagreements with them. Can we work with anarcho-capitalists? That one's a little bit more of a sketchy situation, right? Like we were saying, we have Javier Milei as a bad example of what happens when anarcho-capitalism runs rampant. But could we work with them in a short period, in the short term, so that we can achieve a mutual goal? Perhaps. Like I was saying before, one of my friends from back in the day, he used to say that the enemy of your enemy is not necessarily your friend, right? The enemy of your enemy is your enemy's enemy. So with that, you have to take it into consideration. And with any kind of allegiance that you have, that's the kind of thing that you're going to have to weigh. Is it costly? Is it beneficial in that moment to be able to do that sort of thing? And moving on to the idea of like how we could form some sort of techno-syndicalism online, I think that's absolutely possible, right? I think that the way that we transfer the structure of unions and unionizing maps on very simply and very straightforwardly onto the online sphere. It's just basically like it's like a different area, right? If you think about how you organize unions, right? You can have unions in the workplace, but you could also have tenants unions inside of a single building, or you could have what the Soviet Union called Soviets, right, where it was essentially groups of people inside of a community that came together and they unionized. When you're thinking about it that way, the online sphere, if you think of it as just another place, right, being able to unionize in that way, it kind of works one-to-one. You can totally unionize with other people online, and it would make even more sense to break those down into individual, say, niches, right? Okay. For example, like gym bros online could all unionize together and do a thing, or all the people that do YouTube could all unionize together and they could all do a thing. I know that back in the day, I think it was American Johnson from Non-Compete. He actually worked on starting a union with the IWW with all of the anarchist and communist and leftist in general content creators, right? So, yeah, I definitely think that it's possible.
Yeah, and really good stuff. To piggyback on a couple of things you said, I'll even ask, you have a Discord? Because I could see literal Discord servers as being syndicates. And the nice
Yeah.
thing is, why is that so powerful? Because Francisco Franco, because Sleepy Bowden, or Trumpy can't just be like, "Meh, bad," because one, I don't think the ruling class is that smart with
Hmm.
technology like they claim. Some people are scary, like Sam Altman and the stuff like that, the open AI guy. But I really think if you had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Discord servers with consensus mechanisms, with vetting processes, like asking questions, then they do it. How do I know this? And I'll bring this to two things. There's a Discord server I'm at, and I would love to have you in there if you have Discord, called we just call ourselves Mad Liberty. And I was brought in there by actually a friend who describes himself as an ego com. He likes Stirner and he likes anarcho-communism, so he brought me in there. And my friend, Comrade Bread, one of the people who's pretty prominent in there, Black Flag Anarchist, explained to me how we do things. So someone comes in the server, they say, "Hey, I'm a pick anything you want, agorist. I'm a Black Flag. I'm a egoist. I'm an individualist. I'm an ANCAP." We let ANCAPs in. So there's a bunch of vetting they do. Like when I came in, they're like, "Hey, Mises Caucus." They asked me a bunch of questions, like, "What do you think of youth liberation?" I didn't even know what that was, by the way. I'm like typing, I'm like, yeah, I think it's a thing. People shouldn't be discriminated on age. And they asked, like, "What do you think of trans people?" And I said, "You should treat them with respect." They said, "Someone from your libertarian circle on the right said something not good." And I said, "Hey, look, I believe in freedom of speech, but I also don't believe it's productive just to insult someone."
Hmm.
And there was a bunch of questions. And overall, it went well. The only thing they said I didn't like was, if you're familiar with Congressman Ron Paul, they're like, "Oh, he's racist." I don't think he is. I think he said some comments that maybe back in the day, but I love Ron Paul. So that I did not like. Other than that, went really well. I was vetted in. I came in. They saw my content. Then over time, they say, like, "Hey, you're pretty good," and then they'll push you up. So I started to get the thinking. We have Telegram. I don't like WhatsApp because Mark Zuckerberg has control of
Hmm.
that. But we have Telegram. We have Discord. We have Keybase. We have all these things that are now little, and everybody's on their phone all the time. Unless you're a primitivist, I guess, but then you're part of a tribe, right? So that works. But everybody except the agorists and the primitivists are on their phone. So why can't we do these three things, which would be make cyber syndicates, cyber organizations for actual workplace stuff, and organize them horizontally? And then when we're doing that, use consensus and vetting to get people in. Like, do we all agree that this, if someone does something bad, which they do in the Discord, we get together and then Brad will message me, "Hey, do you think this person did a bad thing?" Like, yeah, okay, should we keep them there for this offense? Like, say I was sharing, I don't know, Weimar Republic stuff, that
Hmm.
there's a consensus, everybody like, "Oh, Kareem just dumb," or "No, that's really bad, that's bad." And then we get people to, then there's a vetting community, then you're either gone or not. I said, why can't we do that for professions and everything in the workplace and get rid of the CEOs? It's funny. Even Elon Musk, not really a fan of a lot of the things he does, but he said CEO is a meaningless title. And I'm like, actually, yeah, it is. I don't see any rare people. There are people who argue there are these rare people. When I was 25, 24, starting my IT career, they're like, the CEO. I'm like, what do these C-level executives do?
Hmm.
Oh, they own and they take, and they
Yep.
play golf. I don't think we die without them. I don't think some of them know how to use a computer. Some of the managers were hitting smartphones and Blackberries like this. This is in like the 2016. I'm like, this is, why are these people? Why can't we just organize without them? And I said, you know what? Let the ANCAPs and the agorists have their businesses and scale them and hire employees if that's what they want. Not everybody's going to, I'll acknowledge one thing. Not everybody's going to want to be part of a co-op But I think if you educated people on how it's so effective and showed them CNT FAI documentaries, that could start a revolution where that happens in the factory. But since we're in a technological age, let's bring it to the point of we do this on Discord and Telegram, and we organize and we get our laptops together, and there's no hierarchy that's unjustified. If someone's better at something else, like if you said, let's start a YouTube channel, I say, okay, Aaron, I will do the thumbnails and the voiceovers. I'll take 25%. You say, I'll do the content, and I'll scream, the kids don't want to get a job at the Sizzler. They have too much Rizzler. And we'll get an SEO guy, and he'll take 25%. You get 50%. And we socialize these profits from AdSense. That's a worker-run industry. And ANCAPs don't think that's possible. So I'm trying to bridge the gap and say, hey, decentralization is possible. People have different ideas on how to organize. As one of the best writers that I didn't bring up that I did read, or I listened to his audiobook, Errico Malatesta said, anarchism is organization, 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 and more organization. And that's really it. I think we just have to organize differently on Discord and Telegram. I really went long there, so
that's totally fine. Yeah, like I definitely think that there are the thing about Elon Musk saying that CEOs, like he's questioning whether or not CEOs are necessary. What was the thing? I completely think that Elon is completely unnecessary.
Yeah,
right. Sorry.
Someone asked him about, well, you're the CEO of something. He said CEO is a meaningless title. And for a long time, I always used to think I'm like, oh, well, the president of a company's not cool, or president of a country sucks. Like screw Biden, screw Netanyahu, screw Putin. But being a CEO is cool. I can make employees do this, and I founded. And I started to think that's kind of meaningless because I'm just working with them towards a goal. What do I want to do? Do I want to start a co-op? Do I want to make a software product? And what if I just made tools available? And what if we just work together? And I'm not opposed to eventually saying, hey, we just do a smart contract system. I was talking to Zachary Marlowe from Money List Society about this. Or just say the smart contract's been fulfilled, boom, boom. And we don't have to use currency if we don't want to. I could see ANCOMs using some kind of currency. I'm not completely sure, because I've been in ANCAP stand for so long, how the gift economy would work. But what if I go to the gift economy and say, like, I know what ANCAPs would say. So, like, I like decentralization, let's work together. But what if someone goes to the grocery store and just grabs everything because they're super greedy? Your gift economy will fall apart. Someone will just steal all the water and everything. You need property rights enforcements, and you'll also not succeed because of the economic calculation problem. Because I think the Soviets at one point did try and abolish money. So I'd be interested to play devil's advocate and see what you'd say to those two things.
Sure. Well, on the aspect of the gift economy, so the way that it works is it's all for all, right? And everybody kind of works together to provide each other with the things that they need, and they take from basically they take from that system whatever they might want, right? So we've started a bunch of organizations that function under that kind of pretext. And they function just fine. The thing about people coming in and taking all of the stuff, does that happen? Occasionally, yeah. Most of the time, though, what happens is everybody else just kind of, people police themselves, right? Like they kind of make sure that they don't take more than they need because they know that everybody else there is going to also need it as well. Is there the occasional person that'll walk? So for instance, we started a community fridge. We have a bunch of different organizations, but that's one of the main ones. And when the fridge gets stocked full of food, do people come by every once in a while and take everything that's inside of it? Yeah, maybe once in a while. Is it a big deal? No. We are able to get 200,000 pounds of food every single year. So if one person was to take a bunch of food for one day, there's going to be more food in a couple of hours from then, and there's going to be more food the next day. And people are going to be able to get everything they want. The question is, right, is why is that person doing that? Usually when we're looking at that sort of situation, People are taking a bunch of stuff because they are suffering from the products of the capitalist system, right? They are in need, and that need becomes almost like a what is that word called? Yes, yeah, it's a PTSD trauma response, right?
Yeah,
Where
they're suffering from, well, because I think a lot of people have been almost conditioned
Mhm,
in this neoliberal system. We think to like take and hoard, get it from the next guy.
yeah,
They've been conditioned in the opposite way, where they think everything. I'm not saying. Here's the problem. And caps will laugh when I say scarcity doesn't really exist in the way you think.
mhm,
Yes, there's a now. There's two things of water behind me. I get it. But there's not like a water shortage, is what
yeah,
I was trying to explain to them because they laughed. And I'm like, no, actually, and there's still elites in the system who believe in Malthusian doctrine. And I'm like, bro, you make $1 billion, but you're not very smart because Kropotkin in Mutual Aid debunked Malthus and said, look, there's enough for everybody if we cooperate. And even I've posted a funny meme with Darwin that I can share. It has the Monopoly man. He's like, capitalism's the best because people, get the best of what they want, survival of the fittest. And he's like, actually, it has a picture of Kropotkin. He says, like, when people cooperate, that we actually achieve more than that. And Darwin even pushed that. He's like, he didn't say that, and it has Darwin. He's like, yes, I did.
yeah,
So I think people have been conditioned to think, oh, I gotta take and hoard, take and hoard, take and hoard. Things are scarce. I'm going to, because the elites have created false
mhm,
scarcity. So yeah, it looks like that. And I
yeah,
will say this: um, whether or not we abolish money, the way the and I do believe there is a such thing as wage slavery. At first, I laughed at that. I said that's crazy, but then I
mhm,
thought about it and said, if I need 60 grand to take care of my family, it's not just easy to go magically manifest a job from the ether to get 60 grand. So
yep,
sometimes you have to put up with a horrible boss, and it's not always possible to get something else. So for me, I said, hey, I understand why people, especially now, are this desperate, and it's twofold reasons. The Federal Reserve has, in my opinion, made the money more worthless. So that is one thing. I agree with ANCAPs there. I want sound money, but even with sound money, at some point, things would be a lot better. I think they'd be great, but there would still be people like Henry Ford when the Federal Reserve existed, but it wasn't, the damage wasn't really there in full swing. The tooth was mostly white. But still, you have people like Henry Ford who exploited their workers. They didn't know where they were. In the epic rap battles of history with Karl Marx, who I'm not a fan because of elite theory, that doesn't work either. But he said, like, you're churning out 4 to 7 fingers a week. So you can still have people like Henry Ford, Rockefeller. In the modern age, you can have things like techno feudalism happening. So I still think the best thing, at least from my perspective, if you get rid of the state, we want probably a gift economy. The only thing I haven't fully convinced myself on was I think the Soviets did try to abolish money,
mhm,
but people are going to scream ECP, or yeah, economic calculation problem. That's what all my ANCAP friends will say. They're like, yeah, have your society. It's voluntary. It's cool, but you won't survive. And they brought up like Jamestown and the Soviets because of the economic calculation problem. Does that make sense? What's the solution to that? Where they say you can't calculate the amount of a certain good that will be needed at this time. So
mhm.
eventually, what will happen is you'll all starve.
Yeah,
Um,
so I think that that's a hilarious argument. I think that it's completely based in nothing, right? When it comes to the economic calculation problem, there is no problem. People already know what they need, they know what they want, and they can go and get it, or they can make sure that other people know that they need it so that it can be grown, manufactured, or built for them, right? The thing about society is the only thing that's holding us back from being able to have all of the things that we need and being able to share those things with the people that need them is money, right? We have all of the land, we have all of the resources, at least the majority of them. Sure, there might be some things that you pull from overseas, and we can talk about that later. But for most things, we have all the land, we have the labor, we have the resources, we have the tools to get them. We just simply don't have the financial ability to go out and do it. So, for instance, if somebody needs a house, there are builders right down your street that could build that house. There are the supplies that you would need to have the bricks to be able to do that. There are the all of the different things. The property is there, the land is there, all of that sort of stuff, right? But what's stopping you? Being able to pull out a loan, being able to negotiate with a bank, being able to get a bunch of contractors together in a room and actually do those sorts of things for a certain amount of money, right? Bidding on contracts, that sort of thing. But when you eliminate all of that money managing and handling and all of that sort of thing, you just do the thing, right? And you can see that in a lot of different examples. That I could bring up historical examples, but I could even bring up ones that I've done in actuality, right, in real life. Um, we have a network of probably over 100 different volunteers, right? And those people specialize in everything from building construction to food distribution, to nursing, to doctors, to name your thing, and we pretty much have somebody that can volunteer to help to do it, right? And all of those people, the amount of time that it takes to give those resources, you know, it's not very much, but when you calculate it all in dollar value, right, it winds up being like hundreds of thousands of dollars. For instance, we built a community fridge. The actual cost of the entire thing, not including labor, would have been something around 20 grand. But we know a guy that can build stuff. He did it for free. We know a guy that could do horizontal drilling so that we could hook up the electricity. He did it for free. We knew places that we could get all of the building materials for free, right? And all of that came because we had the resources and the community to be able to do that. So is it possible that some things might have fallen apart because the Soviets did a thing? Yeah, probably, but they were notoriously bad at organizing shit when it came to that sort of thing. So yeah, that's unfair. They were okay on some things. I don't want to completely disregard Soviet shit, but
I think they were bad at most things. Like, okay,
they were bad at a lot of stuff, right? But when it comes to that sort of thing, like I really don't know where that argument comes from unless we're looking at it through a capitalist framework. What's the main thing that ends up destroying most socialist countries? And of course, socialist countries usually use like a what do you call it? A state capitalist model. Some people call it state socialist, whatever.
yes.
But the thing that ends up destroying, or at least taking a lot of those countries out, or making it very difficult for them, is sanctions by other countries, right? And that's where it comes into the to the other world superpowers and all of that sort of thing, not wanting to play ball with the socialist countries. So yeah, you're going to end up having problems there. But do you usually have problems on the ground level with the people that are working together? Not really, right? There are obviously the issues in the Soviet Union where they took over farmland, right? And people were really upset about that. There's the whole thing with the kulaks. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that sort of thing, but that's the history of it, you know? So there's issues there. But yeah, I don't think that that argument comes from anywhere that is looking at things the way that a gift economy actually works.
Okay.
Right.
And
So
here's why I'm privy to
yeah.
that. Because when I was getting out of college, I went from like I was born Sunni Muslim, then I became an atheist because I'm like, I want to distance myself out of what happened September 11th. And I realized more about that. I said, hey, this is radical stuff. But I was like, I was trying to be cool in college. I'm like, I'm an agnostic. I don't know, bro. There's something. I'm intellectual. And then I'm like, hey, I want to re-find like the mystical side of it. And I listened to Alan Watts, and Alan Watts has a very good little thing on the Great Depression. He talked to a lot of things. He said, the Great Depression, what was it all about? Yes, the banking system crashed. But he said, the funny thing is, there was no less raw material. There's no less wood. There's no less steel. It's like you go one day to say, hey, I want to build a house. And he said, I don't have enough money. He's like, money's a unit of measurement. It's like saying, I want to build a house. Well, there's not enough inches. It's like, what? Like if you told you're a construction worker by trade. So if I said I can't build something, there's not enough inches, you're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. I love that.
And I like the idea. At first, people said, oh, each according to his ability, according to his need, which comes from a dude named Louis Blanc initially. I learned that from David Graeber. It did not. Karl Marx just kind of picked it up somewhere, and I don't know why it's attributed to him, because it came from Louis Blanc, or Louis Blanc, however you say it, the French utopian socialist, who said the idea would just be the axiom: hey, you have the ability to build houses. I have the ability to work on computers. So what? Or I have the ability to trade cryptocurrency, or do this, or make a video for you. So why don't I make videos for your construction company? You like them, you say thumbs up, and then the community says, okay, cool. Aaron, help him build a house. And maybe I engage a little bit in the house building, you engage a little bit in the videos, and that's how it would work. And we could bypass. I know people think I'm crazy now, because I'm like, hey, maybe we can abolish money, because all my they're good people, but with all my friends on the right libertarian side are like, end the Fed, end the Fed. Ron Paul's gonna audit the Fed. Okay, awesome. I like Ron Paul, but I said, here's how we can end the Fed. Why don't you trade your skills for the skills that other people have? Why don't you take your abilities and see what other people need? And that really is where money is exchanged anyway. But we just get rid of this digital footprint that says, oh, it's not this amount, so you can't have it. And that's why I do think in your video, more doctors get in through socialist countries, because it's not like, oh, you got to pay $100,000, 200. If I was an open heart surgeon and I'm like, I'm $300,000 in debt, I got to save this person's life. I'm $300,000 in debt, I got to save this person's life. It's like, I got to save I'm having a heart attack now. Because I don't want to make these payments. I think they can't. Doctors do pay it over time, but still, why do we have to do that when we have the ability and someone else has the need? So, funny enough, I sat down and thought about it today, in a couple of days after listening to you, and it has to be said. And I said, if there's no government and I could go anywhere, anarcho-capitalism would be a place I'd like to go. But if I really have the choice, I would love to live under a gift share skill share economy. That's what my friend called it. I like the platform Skillshare and Udemy, because I made a few videos there. So yeah, I think people need to know about non-hierarchical structures. They need to understand hierarchy a little bit to understand, well, because the Noam Chomsky argument falls apart a little bit when you just, because I debated with a guy named Haas. If you're familiar with him, he's tanky, like,
isn't he the guy that that didn't know that squirt was piss or something like that a few years ago?
I know, Hazal Din. He's a good guy for Palestine and everything. Like, okay. I like that. But the problem is, he's like, why don't you just accept the state as something that's like outside and it just does good, like Putin made Russia great, or like, Trump can make America great, or this guy, there are some of these MAGA communists that almost go fascist and like, we need, Christian values and enforce them, and like the Ayatollah is cool. I'm like, whoa, no. This kills your argument, because yeah, I'm against the Zionist state of Israel killing innocent people, and hence obviously they can't defend themselves. That's the worst thing in this era. But when you defend authoritarian regimes, you don't make it better, because people look at those regimes. When I say we shouldn't get involved in Venezuela, it's not an endorsement of Maduro. And people are like, don't you think the United States? I'm like, no, there's a thing there, I think, called Secus Sola, which is a cooperation of federations that I would prefer run things. There's the Zapatistas. Even people are crapping on Rojava right now. Oh, they're poor. Yeah, they're surrounded by enemies. What do you expect? They're making it work. I think Rojava, and I'm telling people, don't look at Javier Milei. Look at Rojava. That's the experiment. And I will say this, out of all the theoretical dudes, and sorry, my bird's in the background, but of all the theory, Kropotkin's great, Rudolf Rocker is great. And I'll say, but Rudolf Rocker and Bookchin are the only two where something happened. Like Rudolf Rocker at CNTFAI, but Bookchin, people actually started picking up communalism, I think in Venezuela, I think in also Colombia, I think in Now they did work with Evo Morales, but I actually like Evo Morales. You know, if we're gonna pick a status to like, he's kind of based. Um, so that's where I'm at. I do agree with you that ideally on this earth in this physical manifestation, if I had to pick one, you're like, hey, all right, Kareem, the state's been abolished, state government's gone. You got some local districts. What do you want? You can go primitivist. I'm like, I kind of want my PC. Like, okay, well, you can go ANCAP. You can work for one of these, you know, bigger companies, but they're not exactly state owned. No, you can be an agorist and work on this small, you know, I don't like that as much. You can be in a gift share economy, organize horizontally with workers, go to the town hall, vote directly on policy, and also be part of these cyber syndicates that are on Discord and Telegram, where we vote in a 2/3 majority, and we also need a 2/3, and we are executive officer for the week, and we also need a 3/3, a higher majority on more important affairs. From Dennis from Monty Python, I would pick that. I would be like, all right, I'm going to, once I make enough quote unquote money, as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna probably go to one of these Cooperation Denton, Cooperation Tulsa stuff and help them fight against what's going on right now, and then show people that the reason you're losing government wise. Bookchin made a good point. I had a bunch of right libertarians ask me, why do Marxists always beat us, or fascists? Because they believe in power, but you don't. So you'll walk away. You'll say politics sucks, man. But these people, so you need to build a dual power structure. But the only way to build a dual power structure is to do local confederation using direct democracy. I reject Hans Hermann Hoppe's idea that monarchy is better than democracy. Sorry, I threw a lot there too.
Yeah, that was a lot. You broke up just a little bit when you were mentioning the Palestine-Gaza situation. So, I'm not sure what the point was that you were making on that part.
Yeah, tankies are usually good on anti-imperialist measures, but then they go
Okay.
and measure. Here's the problem. Tankies are usually like, yeah, America shouldn't do this. America shouldn't kill people. I agree. NATO's horrible. All good. Anti-imperialism to the end of the day. I don't want to see people in Palestine get bombed, or people in Ukraine get killed, or people in Yugoslavia get bombed when I was a little kid. Just growing up, and I don't want to see that. I think NATO's horrible. I don't think BRICS is a magical fix for that. I don't think that's multipolar. I've listened to Alexander Dugin, and a lot of these like, oh, a multipolar world would be great if China, Russia, Iran, North Korea ran. I'm like, no. It'd actually be better if your local town worked with your local town. That's how you get stuff done. Not, because the problem is the authoritarian left. They're like, America's bad on this. Yes. Oh, but no other country can be imperialist. I'm like, are you crazy? Like, other countries can be extremely imperialist, and they are. What we need to do is reject all statism. I like what it has to be said. Chris has said, be collaborating with here. He said, if anti-imperialism was consistent, it would be anti-statism, not just yeah. And I said that perfectly encapsulates it. So there's that problem of them saying like, hey, imperialism exists nowhere else other than the United States. BRICS is good. Let's try this. Even though they're good on the anti-imperial, I'll work with them on. I'll agree with them on that. I was friends with people, you know, from the Green Party that do that, but then they sometimes go a little bit too, well, you know, this leader's not that bad. I'm like, actually, they are. Actually, what we need is a bunch of little Rojavas, a little Chirons, little I don't know how you feel about this. Tankies like lose it on me in arguments. We'll get down. I'm like, the Zapatistas are kind of anarchists. They're like, no, they're social democrats. They call them neo-Zapatismo. How dare you call them anarchists?
Okay.
Yeah, thoughts on that? Like, if I said the Zapatistas are anarchists, would you agree, or would you say no? They're kind of more Bernie Sanders, social democrat-ish.
No, I mean, with this, as far as the Zapatistas are concerned, I would say that they're, libertarian socialist. Are they 100% anarchist? I think some of them definitely are.
Yeah,
But they have. That's the thing about anarchist organizing and all of these different groups throughout the world. Whatever it looks like in practice is going to be based on the material conditions. So, do the Zapatistas call themselves anarchist? Not necessarily. Some do. I know that some do. The same thing with the people in Rojava. Do they call themselves anarchists? Some do, right? Do the majority of them? I'm not entirely sure. I haven't talked to the majority of them, right? Do they function under more libertarian systems? Absolutely, right? Do they function like Bernie Sanders? No. I don't think that that's necessarily true. When
okay.
it comes to Rojava, and it's been a while, I'm a little bit rusty on all of my history, but I believe that they were functioning out of the system that was kind of spearheaded by Abdullah Öcalan, which is based
Yeah,
in communalism, right?
correct.
And
Yeah, you read
communalism
the book.
is
Yeah,
essentially anarchism, but it also tends to work once in a while with local governments. Is that 100% anarchist? Not necessarily, but it's not 100% Marxist-Leninist either. And as far as the MAGA communists are concerned, I think that their entire ideology is like a completely upside down and backwards farce. Right? Like there are very, very few things that I agree with them on. Aside from the idea that like maybe they are accelerationists, right? And they want to see the entire capitalist structure be completely gutted and destroyed by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. That's the only way that I could actually see communism coming out of MAGA. So yeah, I don't even think that that's like a real thing. But it is something that like people like to say, and I think a lot of people online love to say like shit like that just to be edgy, just to be a little bit unique. They want to be special.
I'm angry and
So
want to smash things.
yeah,
It's funny.
like
There's a guy
yeah.
who's kind of a social democrat dude, like as she goes and interviews people, and he talked to a guy and said, MAGA, right? Make America great again. And it's a dude. He's like, we need to get rid of the big banks. He's like, yes. We need to get rid of big tech. We need to get rid of big pharma. He's like, right, right, right. And then he's like, and to do that, we need like worker-run industries. And he's like,
Mm.
yeah. So I worked for a company called Liberty Pump, and what they actually did was sell some of their, I guess, holdings back to the workers. And it's like they sell some of their holdings back to the workers. It's like dads and sons working there, and like it's kind of worker owned and controlled. And he puts up this thing, MAGA, make America great again, seize the means of production.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not for actually seizing the means in that sense, because I don't like the
Okay.
idea of using that method of the only thing the CNTFAI did that I don't like is, okay, I'm going to take over a factory um, using coercive means. What I would do personally is go to the owner and be like, hey, you've been working here for a while. Like, hey, the workers all got together and agreed based on this. We had a democratic vote. We want to run this, and we'll give you this, 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 and this, but we want to run our factories and do it in a more civil way. So we're not just like taking it. And because I don't like the
Like
idea of like, yeah, I don't like the idea of unnecessarily using force. And I think
mm,
the more workers, a lot of people ask, why don't workers just do it? Well, they don't have the resources. If you're on a factory floor, and let's say ANCAPs, I think, miss this. They say wage slavery isn't a thing. If you're on a factory floor and you have zero time to yourself, how are you going to compete with Bill Gates or
hmm
Zuckerberg, who
yeah, it's
have
impossible.
literally generational wealth? On top of that, they have
Yeah.
time and they have more resources. It's like, yeah, even Spiegel, who I don't know, or some of these people who develop some of these really groundbreaking apps that do have value. I'm using Windows right now.
hmm
Had abundance of time and resources. So I say, Aaron, here's $100 million, so money isn't a problem. Hence, abolish money. And I give you all the time in the world. Then yes, you could probably have your own construction firm. But the thing I would say is, hey, Aaron, before you start this construction firm, organize it so we don't have a wage value of surplus problems and allow
Mhm.
the concrete guy. Sorry, I'm getting off of a cold. I don't know where the cough's coming from. Allow the concrete guy to decide he's going to own the asphalt machine. Allow the people who run the cats to actually own the cats, and then allow the people who do the woodworking to organize all democratically and decide how we're going to do blueprints, how we're going to do this. And I would say this, maybe you disagree with me. A foreman who knows what he's doing, not just someone, but a foreman who knows what he's doing is a temporary justified hierarchy. Am I wrong?
Mhm.
You have more of a background than me.
No, I don't think that you're wrong. I don't personally like using the justified hierarchy phrasing, just because
Okay.
it creates a lot of problems semantically, right? Like justified to whom, hierarchy in what way? What does that necessarily mean? How do we function like that? The way that I usually like to put it is somebody that is, say, an educator, right, or somebody that has real world experience with lots of time doing those sorts of things. If that person can show another person how to do a thing, right, I think that that's fine. Right. It's when that person thinks that because they know how to do a thing, they should be in control and the leader of whatever organization, group, or society. That's when we have the problem, right? And as far as like, I would push back on the seizing the means of production aspect of it by just asking a question: what part of seizing the means of production do you think, or do you find to be violent?
Um, the problem I have is when you go and say like I'm going to take over this factory, and you do use like overt like okay I'm going to grab just like how the Bolsheviks took out the czar. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a good method. I think education, democratic voting, and coming up with a way for recallable delegates to present a method for workers to either unionize in an existing capitalist structure or to turn the whole business, if it's possible, into a series of worker co-ops or syndicates is a better idea. Because the main pushback I got from ANCAPs is like, you know, it's kind of funny, like these prototype experiments of Kospaya. Kospaya was still a monarchy technically, so it's not perfect ANCAP man and ANCAP stand. Neither is Rojava. You have Abdullah Öcalan and some high, and neither is Zapatistas. But the big thing I guess, like, oh, you'll just run with firearms in and take over the factory. And I said, I don't think that's a good method.
Mm,
I would rather
yeah,
use unions now,
sure.
democratic voting, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you still, I would say this: seize the means of legislation at the local level, then find a way for workers to organize horizontally, then allow them to automate their workplace so they actually get their time back, and do that
Mhm.
through democratic and, if you want to call it, diplomatic means would be a good idea. Like instead of saying, hey, Zuckerberg, I'm going to pull you out of your office, you say, hey, we don't like the way you're running your company. We all got together and voted that you're not treating us fairly. Or, hey, Jeff Bezos, I actually would like to use the bathroom and you're not contributing anything anymore. And we appreciate you doing this. So, how about this? We'll come up with a lump sum. We'll give you this. You have millions of dollars, but here, we'll give you a little extra so you can launch more rockets. Please go peacefully, and we're unionizing Amazon. Is that reasonable, or am I?
I don't think that it's necessarily unreasonable. I mean, I would disagree on certain aspects of it, but I think a lot of communalists again would agree with you. The aspect of seizing the means, like everybody rushing into the business with their guns and taking the uh, place by force. I don't think that that is what would be the case, right? What I think would actually be the case is a bunch of workers get together and say, you know what, boss, we don't need you anymore. We don't want you
Yeah,
anymore. We do all of the work. We've put all of our labor towards building this factory, towards making it a success. We're the ones that do all of the work. We're the ones that do all of the labor. So we should own this, and you can go. Right?
yeah,
They essentially fire the boss and they say, okay, here's a cardboard box, pack up your things from your office and you're gone. Right?
yeah.
And then that boss leaves, right? That's not
That's what I
violent
think.
as far as I'm concerned. That's completely peaceful, and the boss would have no concern about doing that to a worker, right? He would do that 7 days out of the week if he needed to. The place where the violence winds up coming in, right, is when that boss goes to the police or goes to the state and says, all these workers got all rowdy and they kicked me out of my own factory. I'm going to need to have police intervention, and the cops have to come down here and they have to shoot the workers. Right? That's the place where the violence comes in. So I would actually say that when it comes to seizing the means of production, it is an inherently non-violent action, right?
Okay.
But when it comes to trying to hold on to that private property, that's when the violence comes in, right?
Yeah.
So,
100% agree with you.
yeah.
The reason I 100% agree with you is because, like, take Rockefeller, for instance.
Mhm.
I'm hearing the same arguments. Like, they're like conservatives, like, I don't like big tech. They, you know, or before this, I don't like big tech. They're censoring my posts, which they actually were in some cases.
Mhm.
And on the left too, you got to figure if you're anywhere outside the neoliberal spider web, they're pushing you out. So
Yeah.
that was a problem. It was people on the left too, like people on the left like you and me, not like, you know,
Mhm.
Joe Biden, you know, Kamala Harris type. But
Yeah.
I like that idea. I agree with that idea. But they're like,
Mhm.
oh, let's split up the company. I'm like, that will make people richer and you'll have more of an oligopoly or more of a thing, where I say the actual way to solve these big corporations is these people stole things anyway. Let's be honest. Bill Gates had a lot of money, had time to learn programming, had lawyers as mommy and daddy lawyers, and he stole stuff from Steve Jobs and IBM and put it together. There was some ingenuity there, but it's a lot of
Yeah.
stealing. Sam Altman
Oh, yeah.
stole data from everybody to make Chat GPT. Do I use it? Yeah, because it's safe time. But Sam Altman stole stuff, and he admitted he did. Mark Zuckerberg stole the idea from the Winklevoss twins. I don't think there's any stealing in Google that I can find, but still.
Yeah.
And all these people actually stole other people's stuff to begin with.
Yeah.
And they
Google
had,
steals my labor all the time.
yeah, Google steal. Yeah, some of our labor all the time. Like here's like $1 for AdSense. We made 50.
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, so instead of breaking up companies, because liberals and conservatives are like, oh yeah, Kareem, we'll get them. We'll bring them in and we'll break up their companies. Oh, Instagram its own company. It goes up. I'm like, that didn't work.
Right.
All right, what do you want to do? Well, I want the tech world, just like it was back then, to have more of workers. And I believe if workers self-managed big tech platforms, you would have much better outcomes.
Sure.
And that's what I want to push is like, I don't really care if Elon, you know, gets X. One thing I'll say is cool is Jack Dorsey seen from Blue Sky. Blue Sky's pretty good. And Jack Dorsey seems to be an anarcho-capitalist now. Like he's literally posting Rothbard stuff. I don't know
Hmm.
how.
I didn't
And
know that.
some of my ANCOM friends, I'd be curious. Do you like early Rothbard or do you like any Hoppe or any Friedman or any of that stuff?
Are you asking me? I
Yes.
read a little bit of early Rothbard, and then I read a little bit of his later work. Do I like the stuff? No, not really. I treated it more like I needed to read it so that I could do some research so that I could know what I was talking about when I was talking to ANCAPs.
Yeah.
But like I don't mind. What is his name? Sterner. I don't mind that. It's a little bit interesting. It's kind of I don't know. It's kind of like an ironic read, you know, and living in like a post irony world. It's kind of a fun thing to like look at and be like, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. But yeah, no, I don't really. I don't. They're not my favorite writers. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Rothbard's one of mine, but like Rudolph Rocker to me is my favorite
Oh,
still.
I like
And
Rudolph Rocker. Yeah, yeah. I read his stuff, and I think that it's wonderful. The radical syndicalism is. I see syndicalism as being like the. Somebody said this in my comments the other day. It's like the engine, whereas anarcho-communism is like the car. You know,
yeah,
so I think that that's really good. Does he 100% agree with everything that Emma Goldman says? No, But do
Emma Goldman is
anarchists
that.
agree on everything all the time? No.
I would have loved to hang out with Emma Goldman. That would have been a
Oh,
blast.
hell
Like,
yeah.
it's like, hey, let's do literature. Actually,
Yeah.
you know how I stopped being an ANCAP? The first
Mm.
thing was, there's a guy named Michael Malice, and I went to see Dr. Ron Paul, and they kept mentioning, oh, he took a picture, with Rogan and stuff like that. I'm like, doesn't he have that book that talks about all anarchy? Yeah. And he mentioned an Emma Goldman quote because people always, what they're going to say. Feel like, oh, the Soviet Union wasn't real communism. Like, oh, you're just justifying. I'm like, no, actually, what got me thinking was Emma Goldman said there's no communism in Russia. And I'm like, wait, what does she mean by that? I don't understand. There's always
Mm-hmm.
communism in Russia. That's what I thought. And then, wait, who's Bakunin? Wait, there were other leftists that were challenging Marxism? But there's other
Yeah.
forms of communism, like council communism, like Bundism, like anarcho-communism. So yeah, I think syndicalism is the engine. I think it still is the engine. Um, I just think we need to integrate it. I think the problem happens, and Bookchin was right, that a lot of people, when they talk about these things, refer to them from, I guess, the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
which was, there's some basis there. But the problem is the model's outdated, where you're like, okay, it's not a primarily industrial society, it's more of a tech
Yes.
society. And whether I
Right.
like that or not, that's how it is. Most people, including yourself, I mean, we're live streaming right now. So me talking about like, one of my ANCAP friends said this. He said, Kareem, even if you say seize the means of production, I don't know what you mean. The means of production, Kareem, now are mostly a laptop, which is what
Mm-hmm.
we're using. So how do,
Servers, right?
yeah, so laptops, servers, phones, are there still factories? Yeah. Could they still
Mm-hmm.
organize horizontally? Of course. I think Cooperation Tulsa is great. I want to go out there. I'd love to help with your community fridge if I make it up to Canada.
Sure. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. Maybe I'll make it up there, eh?
For
Let
sure.
it be the 51st state. I'm gonna make it the 51st state, so my capitalist overlords, oligopoly overlords, and the transnational banking class at BlackRock can run it. So, I think that we need to bring syndicalism
Mm-hmm.
from the Noam Chomsky, from Marx to and from Marx to Bakunin to Noam Chomsky to, okay, how do we integrate this? And Zachary Marlowe from Moneyless Society, how do we integrate this into a world of smart contracts, cyber syndicates that can be all over the world? What technology do we use, like Discord, Telegram, and Keybase? And how do we organize people horizontally and use vetting methods? And I'm even fine with each town in America or each province, or I think it's province and municipality in Canada, making their own
Mm-hmm.
Discord. We have our own rules saying, hey, Aaron, you do trash pickup tonight. Because you did trash pickup, we'll cook your food. And if you want some money, fine. Or if you want a favor, fine. I'm not opposed. Not opposed to playing around with the mutualism. I think things would be mixed too. I think there'd be some mutual aid. I think there'd be some gift exchange, and I think there would be some crypto or gold or silver, because people like those, and I don't think it's bad to use gold or silver, and maybe some actual sound money that's made locally, like printed from a local bank or created from a local bank. I'm not even opposed to that. So something like that. And then we say, hey, we are an ANCOM or an syndicate, or an ANCOM society. These are the syndicated industries that we have here, bricklayers, this. You can join these servers too. The Manitoba bricklayers here and the Manitoba server. We have our own constitution that should probably have Errico Malatesta's thing that we don't agree with concessions or assumptions that don't take into consideration any real sympathy for dissenting members. I don't know how Errico Malatesta wrote so amazingly. Maybe he's just throwing that Italian poetry out there, because
Mm.
some of his quotes, just like one of my favorite ones was, I don't just appeal to anarchists, but anybody with an open heart. and a open mind. Just
Mhm.
some of the things are amazing. Very good writer. So that's what I do:
Oh
an
yeah.
actual institution, Discord server, vetting,
Mhm.
and um, that's a way to organize the community members because we're all on our phones anyway. That's not going to change even if Trudeau's gone, Poilievre's gone, Maxime Bernier, who I think is a little bit better than those two, but not that great. Um, but if you get rid of Doug Ford, all those people, I think people would govern themselves. But how are they going to do that? Well, if you say go to the town hall, someone's like, I want to Netflix and chill, man. But if you say get on a Discord and we're having a Zoom meeting tonight, and if you're not there and we're voting if we want to take fluoride out of the water, you press one. And if everybody does, we send a
Yeah.
recallable delegate to the water treatment plant. And then I say, like, oh, the town over also has a problem with their water. Well, let's get together all in a Zoom or all in a town hall if we have and confederate. Oh, we're being invaded? By who? Orange Man wants to take us over for the 51st state. All right, fine. Doug Ford, stop eating. Like, come back here. Okay. Trudeau, stop for 1 second. We're going to get on a huge Zoom meeting now,
Right.
everybody temporarily, and say, what do we do about Donald Trump and his tariffs? Okay, we're all confederating as Canada, for a couple weeks. Okay, we got rid of the Trump Fed. All right, everybody go back to your municipal discords and figure out trash collection. Do I
Yeah.
kind of is
Like
that
that 100%. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like that sounds like it would be a viable option, right? What techno syndicalism is going to look like once it's fully realized and become a thing, it's going to depend entirely on like how people decide to organize with one another. But that's 100% a way, right? Like you can have a Discord server with all of the whatever plumbers or all of the people from 52nd Street or all
yeah,
of the people that are in the LGBT community, and they can all be in their own little Discord servers, and they could use perhaps a teams and spokes councils model, right? That's something that I've talked about a few times before, where everybody from each one of those Discord servers says, "Hey, Jack or Jill or Benny or whatever, you're going to be the spoke for this specific meeting that's coming up." You jump into a Discord live with a bunch of other people that are also spokes for their separate councils, and they make a decision or they come up with an idea, and then they bring that idea back to those Discords. Those people in those Discords make that decision, and then that law that idea is put into practice. Right? That can absolutely happen. Um, and that is a way that we organize all of the time, honestly, right? And the
yeah.
other thing too is that
Community
when it
fridge
comes to something
Discord.
that's oh, sorry, go ahead.
Community fridge Discord and Telegram. Hey, I'm
Yeah,
going to bring some
yeah,
ham. Okay, I'm going to bring this. Since you brought some
yeah,
ham, I'll give you some bread out of the thing. Like,
yeah,
oh, okay, cool. From
yeah,
each
and
according
it's
to
not.
his ability to each according to his need, right?
Yeah, and you got to remember too, like when it comes to as far as that's concerned, yes, that is literally exactly what we do, right? If we need something done, we ask somebody in one of the we use WhatsApp and stuff like that, but same idea. You know,
Yeah.
when we need something done, like if the fridge needs to be cleaned, if somebody needs to go do a check on somebody to make sure that they're still breathing or whatever, we contact the team that is involved in that. In the case of fridge cleaning, we'll contact the cleaning team. In the case of somebody possibly suffering from an overdose, we contact the healthcare team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they go out and they do a thing. The thing that is important to remember when it comes to mutual aid is that there's no expectation of immediate return, right? So we do these things for each other, not because I'm going to get a steak later or I'm going to get like whatever it is, like some gold or some silver or whatever or crypto. We're doing it because we know that it's helpful for the rest of the system to function, and all of the other people that are cooperating in that system also know that. So that's why they'll jump in and they'll do a thing as well. You know, like I don't pay personally, I don't pay the medical staff to go out and make sure that somebody is safe from an overdose. Do they get a steak every once in a while? Fuck yeah, they do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, but there's no expectation of that. You know, and there's a bunch there. You brought up so many points, and I jotted a couple of them down. So there's a thing that you were mentioning earlier about like uh, when we were talking about violently taking over the means of production or whatever versus doing it in a more peaceful way. The example that I gave, right, where everybody came together and they said, "Hey, we want the boss to be fired, and we're going to take control of the corporation." Something similar, not exactly that, but something very similar ended up happening with the Mondragon Corporation, right? And or Mondragon, or however you pronounce it. And that's something that Richard Wolff brings up all the time, where they basically looked at everything and they were like, you know what? We don't like the way things are. Let's get rid of the boss. You're fired. And they kicked him out, and then they took control of the factory. And then so then the cost of people is, and then the other thing too is, when we're organizing online, right, there are lots of different things that people are going to need online, and there's lots of things that people just want to do intrinsically without being rewarded in any way. There are tons of people that create video games, for example, and they do that 100% for free. There are tons of people that sorry.
I was messing with my ANCAP friend because he's super ANCAP. He's like, I don't like these leftists, and Harry was doing it. He's like, Kareem, I just did good with my Ubuntu server, and I said, woo, congrats. Open source is communism. He's like, no, open source is not communism. He's like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Communism?
Yeah, and it is essentially like a type of communism, kind of, right? People are creating open source IPs and stuff like that, and completely circumventing the idea of needing to own that intellectual property. Even intellectual property is theft, if you want to look at it that way, right? So there's lots of people that are able to do that. And as far as Emma Goldman is concerned, and her writings on the Soviet Union and how there was a ton of problems in the Soviet Union, I would actually suggest that if people are interested in knowing more about that and knowing the critiques that anarchists have against it, they should check out Alexander Berkman's writing on the Soviet Union. I think that it's called No True Soviet or something like that. If I remember, I'll send you the link, or at least I'll tell you exactly what the book is, and you can link it in the description or whatever. But basically, Alexander Berkman and Emma Goldman were a thing for a little while. They were like a couple, and they ended up getting deported from America to the Soviet Union. Oh, are you still there? You're frozen. No, we're frozen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, am I there?
I can hear you, but I can't. You're not moving.
Am I? Give me 1 second here.
No problem.
Okay.
It might be on my end too. I don't know. Oh, there you are.
I think maybe. Hey.
You're back. But it might be my internet. I'm not sure.
It could be either or, but yeah, no, you made a really good point. As Emma Goldman woke me up kind of from that, like, hey, oh wait, it really wasn't real communism, and it was an eye-opening experience, and a lot of ANCAPs did not like that because they just want to be like, commies are all the same. It's kind of funny. ANCAPs will generally think that commies are all this ANCOMs or just, Trotsky people. And then I've heard some ANCOMs say, anarcho-capitalists are just the same as the monopoly man. And, they're just the same as the evil big business dude. And I'm like, actually, no, they're not. But like, to come to that realization, you actually have to go to these people and talk to them. I remember I was debunking, I'd asked my thought, you want to call him a thought leader, Keith. Rothbard wrote an essay on the CNT-FAI and said that syndicalists have a death wish. And I read the essay, and he said that without the profit motive, individuals would lack the incentive to work effectively, leading to economic dysfunction. But I thought of a response to that, which is the view misinterprets the human motivation by ignoring the potential for intrinsic incentives like community well-being, self-management to drive productivity. And the focus on private property as essential for human freedom overlooks the potential for collective ownership to ensure fairness and prevent exploitation. Also, another issue with that view is historic there are historical examples, the levelers, the diggers, going all the way back to the medieval ages to now, where we've seen the CNT FAI actually pull it off. That freedom isn't limited, and syndicalists advocate for freedom away from exploitation and domination. I actually have turned from the point that I used to think leftist anarchism was restrictive. Now I think anarcho-capitalism freedom is restricted. Does it offer
Mhm.
more freedom? Because I'm going to send this to prominent anarcho-capitalists. Does anarcho-capitalism offer more freedom than minarchism or minarchism, conservatives and liberals? Yes, because you've got martial law. But there's still the fact that there's no free, that there, even if you have sound money, your life would be better. Maybe it'd be like the 1950s or 60s, hopefully without the social issues of racism and stuff, which are a problem. But hopefully, it might be like the 19, but you'd still be restricted to your boss in a vertical situation, and there would still be value extraction that would be happening.
Yeah.
And I think there would still be the problem of, hey, I'm still on the factory floor. Yes, my life has gotten better because anarcho-capitalists have deregulated and got me sound money, and I'm not stuck with the Federal Reserve. But the ultimate freedom would come in a horizontal organization of my local community, my
Yeah.
means of production, or my laptop, or people working together. And then ultimately, on top of that, a gift and share exchange based on each according to his ability to each according to his need, which is kind of funny because people said I'm authoritarian now because I said, look, I changed my mind. Was Marx and Engels good? No, but they lost the baseball game. But did they have some home runs? I think so.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah, I mean,
we're
there's a
for
reason why
sure.
Marx's Capital is one of the most famous books in history, right? It's one of the reasons why it's so important. It's been influential on countless different organizations and people that have organized societies, right? So, did they make some mistakes? Fuck yeah. Did they also get some really good? Did they also have some really good ideas? Absolutely. Marx certainly more than Engels. And yeah, so I think that that's definitely a thing. The thing about anarcho capitalism, right, is and I get into arguments with anarcho capitalists all the time about this. Is like I cannot see a society where anarcho capitalism doesn't wind up resorting to some sort of structure that is not not horizontally organized, but how it doesn't have some sort of authoritarian bent to it, right? Because the whole idea of a corporation, of a company, of capitalism is that there is, say, a business owner or whatever. They get a business, they start a business, they acquire a business in some way. Then they are the owner and controller of that business. And anybody that wants to work in that business has to show deference to that person, right? So I don't really see. Are you still there? You disappeared. All right. Well, while you're disappeared, I don't know if I'm still live or if I'm completely gone. But I'm gonna make a couple cuts with my saw. So I'm just gonna mute the microphone here for a
I'm back. Sorry. I'm not sure what happened there. Are you still with me? Oh, sorry. I highly, I
Can
highly,
you hear me now?
yeah, I highly
Hey,
apologize.
right on. Sorry, I was my internet shut right off. That was totally on my end. I apologize about that. Do you have any idea how far I made it?
Yeah. It's still running. That's the nice thing about StreamYard. It still keeps going. But yeah, anarcho-capitalism, you're saying, always ends up in feudalism. I'd say sometimes it
Well, not
doesn't.
necessarily
Sometimes,
feudalism, but yeah, a type of something that's similar to feudalism. So, like, I really don't understand how they can square that circle. And I've asked tons of anarcho-capitalists this question, and it seems like they can't. The thing is, though, is that a lot of the anarcho-capitalists I talk to are in a transitionary period, right? They don't usually come talking to me unless they're kind of going more left, you know. So like my perception on it is a little bit biased because that's the kind of people that I'm talking to the most often. So like maybe you can explain that to me a little bit better. Like how do they square that circle?
they square it by saying, look, we define anarchy actually a little bit differently, but it's a yin and yang. That's how my mentor described it to me. People on the
Okay.
left will say that anarchy means the abolishment of all, I know you don't like the word, unnecessary or unjustified hierarchies, and the worker own and control the means of production
Mm-hmm.
and communities that work from the bottom up. You can't have like, I'm the king. Like, no, there's no king. We do it from the village level, bro. It's Dennis. We go to two-thirds majority, and then this thirds majority. Monty Python's funny, but like actually villages did that. So that's how left
Yeah.
people on the right would say, let right-wing anarchists, and even some minarchists, but Rothbardians and agorists would say that for anarchy to exist, it should be voluntary. Rothbard has a quote: I define an anarchist society where there is no legal coercion against anybody. So I can't legally say like I can steal anything like that. That. However, the problem I think that happens is you can have someone like Jeff Bezos who like will act like that, but they'll say, well, he's not directly coercing you because you had the ability to go and work for him. That's true to a specific extent. It is. It's not like you can't opt out of government services. You can opt out of working for Amazon. But if you have family members to help and Amazon pays you 70 grand, it's not as always easy to go. Now, if the money and wages were fixed, I would say there's better chance that you could leave Amazon and that the market will voluntarily work. And they want completely, agorists and ANCAPs want completely free markets, and they believe markets will solve that problem. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I believe it'll solve it to a smaller extent than neoliberalism than what we have,
Mm.
or this MAGA thing. I think it would be better. I would think it would be a lot better. I still say, is it anarchy because it's voluntary? Yes, but you're still having unjustified hierarchies. You're still saying yes, Musk, yes, Bezos, yes, Altman, yes, guy who
Yeah.
stole everything with generational wealth. I'll do what you want. But if people want to voluntarily do that, and there are, unfortunately, I hate to say this, there's some people who have a very strong employee mindset. I don't want
Mm.
I don't want anything stolen from me. I get it. I don't want to be coerced, but I don't want to invent anything. I don't want to, I just want to work for somebody. And if somebody does want to work for somebody and it's voluntary, like, I hate to, like,
Who
if
are
you
you to
want to
stop
start,
them kind of thing?
yeah, if you want to start a construction company and bill the guy $300 an hour and then only give your employees 10 and they're okay with that, ANCAPs would say that's okay. It's still
Mm-hmm.
anarchy because there's no state. Remember, we're defining state and government differently in your video. The state is an organized monopoly on force that controls military, police, and sometimes some
Yeah.
religion aspects. I guess Trump is this weird faith leader. So I don't believe that I don't believe that church and state ever completely separated. But, argument for another day. To really break it down, I think right-wing libertarians would say he voluntarily took this job. He knew Aaron was billing $300 an hour, and he chose to work for $10 to $15. He chose to. He signed a contract, so it's legitimate. It's not a social contract that you didn't sign, and they would bring that from Lysander Spooner, who Lysander Spooner was a mutualist, but I really like him. They would say, look, he signed a contract. It's legitimate. It's done. And Combs would say, look, this guy took a construction job because he needed to feed his family. He didn't have a choice. So, Aaron, you're stealing from this guy, even though it's voluntary. Right. You're stealing from this guy, and that's an unjustified hierarchy because you're not on the ground doing the work with them. You're just billing the client $300 and taking the surplus value. And Caps
it works out as coercion.
Yes, and Caps would say, no, Aaron has to do that so he can make a profit, so he can utilize that profit to build his company bigger to help more people. So it's a little, and mutual aid comes in the fact like, hey, I'm going to give some to some charity here. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. We're defining
it totally makes sense. And to be fair, that is something that I've had ANCAPs explain to me before, and I'm a little bit out of practice because it has been about 3 years since I actually have really had a conversation about this. But that makes total sense. And the thing is about that is you say it is anarchy. I think that they define it as anarchy. Can we call what is going on in China socialism? I think that the people that are in China, or I think that the Chinese Communist Party would call it socialism, but I think that actual socialists would say that it's not. But actual socialists, now are we getting into like a no true Scotsman fallacy? So to circumvent the no true Scotsman fallacy, I would say that to my definition of what anarchism is, I would look at that and say that that's not anarchism, right? Anarchism is how you described it, the work and control and ownership of the means of production and the abolition of all unjustified or unnecessary hierarchies, right? Which is the definition that I've used many times before.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. Yes. On the left side. On the right side, they'd say any interaction that's voluntary, as long as there's no legal coercion, it's fine. If Jeff Bezos says you work for $1 and you agree and you sign a contract, it's anarchy still. Agorists would probably say, okay, and I'll make a distinction. This might make it harder. Primitivists would be like, why using technology? It's not anarchy. This isn't, or they'd say it is anarchy, but you shouldn't be using technology, which is fine. They make a distinction. Here's where it gets tough. There's term definitions. They would define this as technology. They would define what you have. Actually, I have my toolkit here. They would define these as tools. And to be fair, the naming and the utilize the things that exist are not social constructs. But is this a tool? Is this technology? Or the primitivist side? Is this public property? Is this personal? Is this private? I think a lot of these get into semantic generalizations of social constructs of how things can be used. Is this usufruct property from Bookchin? Because I'm using, do I own the hammer when I'm not using it? So to square those things out, that's one thing. And then also, I think ANCAPs would say, hey, I took a job at a big firm. I'm barely making it for my family, but there's no state, or I'm doing well for my family, but there's no state, so we're good. And then ANCOMs would say, no, there's a surplus value here where you're being screwed out of value exploitation because of a vertical structure. And Agorists would say, I agree with you, ANCAP, that we need free markets, black markets, gray markets. I guess it's not black or gray market, but we need markets. But I agree with you, ANCOM, that it should be lower to the village, community, municipal level. So what we're going to do, we're going to break up this big bank and you just work at a local bank. That's the way we should do anarchy. We shouldn't try and scale to these massive things because, it can lead to a type of feudalism. So I think Agorists would be kind of in the middle. And that's where it gets dicey. And mutualists, I think, would say, look, it's anarchy if you have a workers. It's anarchy if the ANCOMs are allowed to, um, if you're allowed to horizontally organize, and if you're allowed to collectively own the means of production. But my understanding with Proudhon, when he said property is theft, he was talking about the aristocracy. So Proudhon would say you should. Your house should be your private property, but you should work at a workers' association. So mutualism even has a. I don't know if I'm doing mutualism right because I haven't really read Proudhon. I've just listened to some audiobooks. So it gets dicey we all agree let's get rid of the state. But when I tell people it's still dicey after that. Like the hard part actually isn't getting rid of the Klaus Schwabs, the Trumps, the Bidens, the because a lot of people, don't like being ruled over. I think we can get people even to a point where they're like, I don't like being ruled over. I'm like, great. The hard part comes in. The really hard part comes in. Okay, how are we going to organize? Like, oh, well, I want workers' associations, but I want to still own my house. And it's like, no, I want workers' associations and co-ops and federations, but I would like to collectively own to collectively be part of the community and to have collective property. Or no, I want to completely privatize. And there's even factions in anarcho-capitalism that go as far as Hans Hermann Hoppe, which is like the right of anarcho-capitalism, will say, you can debate if this is fascism or not, that says, I want a gated community. I don't want poor people who are lower income here. I don't want certain even type groups of people here or associations of people here. People make the joke about like Hans Hermann Hoppe is an anarcho-monarchist, or like Hans Hermann Hoppe would have like a gated community, like that type of thing. So some ANCAPs could say, hey, I don't want to associate with leftists, close them off the gated community. I don't want to associate with poor people. I don't want to associate with premies. I don't want to associate with mutualists. I just want to associate with other well-to-do ANCAPs and have private police, which I'm in between. I think private police would be better because there is a economic incentive that they could do well, and there's things like threat management. But I've talked to other leftists, and they say, hey, the best police would be community policing. Me and Aaron throw on a couple AR-15s and make sure the neighborhood's good, and for that, someone gives us dinner and stuff. So, sorry if I'm making it dicey and weird. That's how I've tried to granularly break down some of these things.
Yeah.
And then anarcho-transhumanists and other people have, there's a hard part with anarchy where there's an economic side to anarchy. There's a lifestyle side. So even if you get everybody to agree we're in a commune, some people are like, I'm only in the commune for myself. Sterner, man. Woo, I do what I want. And everyone's like, no, we're a community. There's some people who say technology is great. We need more crypto and more blockchains and AI. I get in arguments with my anarchist friends. Are like, I have some people who hate AI. Never use AI. AI is the devil. I have some, from what I've heard, the school of anarcho-transhumanism, people that are basically like Neuralink, like, all right, chip me up, AI. They're still anarchists. They hate the state, but you see how it gets confusing. And some people will say, even, Kareem and Aaron, what you're doing is doesn't make any sense. There's only just anarchy. You're either for the state or not. And I agree with that to an extent, but I also look at it practically and say, yeah, there's anarchy or statism. But me and Ted Kaczynski, if he was still alive, wouldn't live the same life. He'd be in the woods. I'd be in a gift share economy with a laptop. Completely different existence. So hopefully I didn't go too far with that. So yeah.
No, that makes sense. Like, it reminds me of like the old debates that anarchists used to have. Again, bringing it back to Emma Goldman, about the anarchism without what is it? Anarchism without adjectives. We had a similar debate about things to do with that back in the day, right? When we were talking about are mutualists anarchists, and can mutualists come to the table and work with anarcho-communists on some things? And I think like mutualists, agorists, that sort of thing, I think that we're closer to being able to have like a sort of simpatico ideal system than anarcho-communists and anarcho-capitalists certainly are. But it kind of makes me ask the question, right? Do I and again, I'll bring it right back to the very start. Do I think that it's possible for us to work together? Yeah, under certain circumstances, strange bedfellows do exist on occasion, right? When you're at war, when you're in a battle against something that is a much larger force than you, sometimes you wind up in situations where certain things happen, and that's the reality of history. That's not me making a judgment call on it. That's not me saying that I want that to happen. It's not me saying that I'm necessarily for or against it. It's just a thing that historically has and will happen in the future, right? But then my question for the people that think that it could possibly go further than a temporary alliance is, well, anarcho-communists are kind of stuck in this middle position, right? Where we definitely agree with anarcho-capitalists on destroying the state, but we definitely agree with Marxist-Leninists on destroying capitalism. Anarcho-communists, or sorry, anarcho-capitalists and Marxist-Leninists are never going to agree with one another, right? So, or maybe they will. I don't know. You can tell me if you think that they would. But just to finish off my point, where do the anarcho-communists sit in that sort of situation, right? Because we agree that we need to destroy all of these things, but the two people on either side, or the two groups on either side, want diametrically opposing outcomes, right, to what we want and to what each other want. So how do we, at the end of the day, is your idea that we can possibly move forward through, say, a revolutionary period and get onto the other side where now we're going to be able to work cohesively with anarcho-capitalists and also Marxist-Leninists, right? Marxist-Leninists are going to be against anarchists of all stripes because they believe in a strong state. Yeah. And anarcho-capitalists believe in strong capitalism, right? Unfettered capitalism. So, like, what do you think the the ANCOMs do in that situation?
Okay, that's a good point, because I'm an anarcho-pluralist, so I like it all. But given the choice, it's like, all right, honey, where are we moving? Where are we moving the kids? Well, let's go to gift share economy land. Like, okay, cool, great. So here's my answer. I think the CNTFAI working with the UGC, I think that is correct, the correct one. That's what screwed them over. And people like, oh, they built concentration camps. I'm like, the Marxists did that. The Marxists screwed them over. They could have beat Francisco Franco and having him not deteriorate Spain. It's funny. People like, what if Germany won World War II? What would it look like? Well, I can kind of tell you Francisco Franco won, and he was friends with that short, crazy guy. So I think you have a pretty good historical example. You don't need to ask me that. So Marxist-Leninists also believe in what's called elite theory. If you saw during 2020, someone puts on a mask and someone's in charge of enforcing that, they go crazy. Oh, I have a little bit of power. Put on that mask now. It's like, whoa, you turned into friendly barista to, like, commissar. How did that happen? Well, I'll agree with Peterson on one thing. Everybody has it in him to be, including anarchists, to be extremely authoritarian when given a little bit of power. So that's why Bakunin rightfully said, if you invest power in just the regular working class person, in a few years he will be worse than the Tsar. And it was. I think it's even fair to say that Stalin, Lenin, Gorbachev, all those people were not Soviets. Could Soviets mean council? That's all it means, workers' council. And they were worse than the initial ruling class in Russia, even though they weren't good. So I don't think it's worth it to work. And on the flip side, I don't think anarcho-capitalists working with people who say helicopter man is good, because he'll throw you out of a helicopter if he finds some of your beliefs not good. So working with statist counterparts, doesn't seem to work. It's kind of funny. It's like, hey, let's work with Trump. It's like, okay, he gave us one or two things, woo, and now he's going straight. Then he goes imperialist on a lot of things, Greenland, Panama, all this, moving people out of Gaza. So I'm like, these transactions don't seem to work in your favor. It seems that Marxist-Leninists. There's a funny little cartoon as Lucy with a like commander hat, and that has Charlie Brown with an ANCOM thing. It says, "Come on, anarchists, we'll build stateless socialism this time. Promise." With the football. So every time, that's why I'm saying take it online, take it to Discord. And here's what I would say: we work with the anarcho-capitalists, the mutualists, everyone to destroy the state. Once the state is gone, then I'm not saying we coexist kumbaya. Just like Republicans and Democrats don't tend to like each other. They don't tend to live in the same area, but they'll work together. Republicans and Democrats will work together. Globalists will work together, but they don't particularly like each other, even in some cases. I don't think Democrats and Republicans all like each other. They don't. Some of it is WWE style, but they find a way to work together to a common goal. Okay. We'll take that to anarchist land. What if anarchists and anti-state radicals, as Keith Preston puts it? And if you're on Facebook, I can add you to the thing. He's really good at history. He breaks it down.
I'm not on Facebook, no.
Oh, okay. But I'll definitely hit you up if you're on Discord. I think you have Discord, right?
No, I don't have Discord anymore either. I had it a long time ago, and I just kind of discontinued it. But I might still have an account on there. If I do, I'll check and find out. And yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But you can get a hold of me on Blue Sky.
I'm on Blue Sky.
That's probably the best way. What's that?
So I'm on Blue Sky. So actually, Keith Preston, answered this, because for a long time I'm like, this could be a disaster, because what would happen is the state would collapse. You'd have a few weeks of, hey, it's like, no, you're a commie, no, you're a dirty capitalist, all this stuff. How would we prevent that? So like Keith Preston actually has addressed this in a book called Failures of Anarchism. And what he writes, I'm going to paraphrase this: imagine for one unhorrible, unpleasant moment the anarchist movements in North America in their present form were to carry out an actual revolution. What kind of social or political system would be the result? The Wikipedia, and it's ridiculous, entry on anarchism lists a number of people. Michael Albert, Chomsky, Ashteen Alson, Black Power anarchist, Hakeem Bey, lifestyle anarchist, Bob Black, nihilist, Kevin Carson, Proudhonian. Kevin Carson's in my little Facebook chat, funny enough. Noam Chomsky, Peter Coyote, Howard Elric, David Graeber, rest in peace. Hans Hermann Hoppe, Jeff Luther, Derek Jensen, primitivist. You have Hans Hermann Hoppe, Derek Jensen, completely, yes, get rid of the state. But one's like, I want to be a prim. One's like, I want a gated community with private police. How do you reconcile that? He said there's three ways you can do it. He said one could be anarcho-totalitarianism, which is a joke. Whatever faction or group that happens to have the most power represses their rivals, and that would be terrible. Another would be anarcho-mass democracy, where we have an anarchist parliament, syndicalist, primitivist. They said, well, it might be interesting. It ultimately wouldn't be much different than the kind of states we have today. So I think this is the real solution. What got me to be why I say I'm an anarcho-pluralist, not specifically an ANCOM or a syndicalist, although syndicalism is my preferred way of doing things. And a gift share economy would be my preferred place to live. It said the only other alternative is the dispersion of power to local units. These could be localities where everything is completely privatized, Hoppe, or everything is completely collectivized, anarcho-communism, or some point in between. There could be some points in between. The specific anarchist tendencies these communities represented would be determined according to prevailing ideological currents at the local level. One contemporary anarchist observes the superficial story is that the Primies control the Northwest, the Southwest desert, and the Appalachians, while the Reds, he uses the term Reds as ANCOMs, not Bolsheviks or Marx, control the entire Northeastern bloc, and have a mild advantage everywhere else. So after the revolution, the Primies would be dominant in their regions, and the Reds in theirs, and presumably the Free Staters in theirs, and the queer anarchists in theirs, and so forth. It's interesting to observe how radically different value systems and definitions of freedom employed by these kinds of anarchists are. One anarchist has noted that some anarchists wish to bar alcohol, drugs, tobacco, meat, porn, S&M, and prostitution for their communities. I think some of those are fun, so I want them in mind. But those should go a long way with those libertine anarchists, whom anarchy is synonymous with all sorts of legalized vice. Then there's the conflict between the ethno-preservation nationalist anarchists and the anti-racist left anarchists, between the proprietarian anarchists. I've even come across the anarchist proponent of the draft. Of course, these kinds of anarchists will insist that the others are not true, but that's besides the point. Each of the different anarchist factions consider themselves to be the true anarchists. Hey, ANCAPs are the only anarchists. So the adherents of these many philosophies act as though the fate of the world depends on their every move, when in reality, each of these tendencies will often have no more than a few more hundred people, so rarely is any attention. So if anarchists want to have any impact on the wider society whatsoever, I believe there is only one way. First, anarchists, whatever their differences, need to band together in large enough number to become a single issue political pressure group. This would be a pressure group just like those in the mainstream: pro-choice, pro-life, pro-gun, anti-gay, anti-gay, marijuana, decriminalization. And the purpose of the pressure group would be to reduce political authority down to the lowest possible unit, which I believe is the local community, cities, towns, villages, and neighborhoods. I recognize some anarchists wish to reduce politics down to the individual. I'm a little more skeptical of that. For instance, I'm not sure competing criminal codes could exist in the same territorial jurisdiction. I'm willing to disagree and say let's work on to reduce things down to city, state, or village level, then debate how much we go from there. Such a pressure group could include not only anarchists of every kind, but also left-green, decentralized, conservative local sovereignty groups, regionalist or secessionist tendencies, and good old-fashioned Jeffersonian states. And this idea does not mean that every locality would need to be an independent nation unto itself. They could be sovereign entities within boreal territories, confederations, so as long as they retained the right of withdrawal veto policies favored by larger bodies. And this way, even communities with radically different cultural values or economic arrangements could collaborate on projects of mutual interest, such as the maintenance of temporary transportation systems, firefighting, or common defense. And meanwhile, outside the context of the single-issue movement, the different factions could continue their interests in different contexts. Libertarians could push for private money or competing currencies. Syndicalists could continue to push for anarcho-syndicalist unions. Primitivists could set up tech-free communities or villages. Anti-racists could protest Klan marches and national anarchists. Pro-lifers could agitate against abortion. Gun nuts that belong to the NRA, which I'm a gun nut, but I don't, and pacifists could belong to Catholic workers. Anarcho-communists could set up and organize Israeli-style kibbutzim, and anarcho-capitalists could set up their preferred private defense agencies. Additionally, different factions with different beliefs could target certain geographical areas for colonization, such as Free Staters in New Hampshire, Christian Exodus in South Carolina. Native Americans are doing this in the Lakota Republic, or Ron Paulistas are doing this in the Liberty districts. This does not mean sovereign communities cannot have institutionalized protections for individual liberty, minority rights, or popular rule. And some constitutions or municipal charters already have protections of this type, sometimes on a more expansive level than what's found in the U.S. Constitution. Nor does this mean that libertarian anti-statism is the only value. There's also value in life that transcends politics. One can be committed to other issues. Social ecology would be one for me, or anti-racism or things like that. Being committed to political decentralization. For instance, I'm interested in prisoners' rights, legal jurisdiction, penal and police reform, ending the war on drugs, repealing consensual crime, opposing zoning ordinances, eminent domain, the overregulation of land, housing markets, sex worker rights and the right to bear arms, self-right defense rights of students, and the handicapped, medical patients, inmates' freedom, and press labor. So land reform and indigenous people's rights, and alternative media. And he agrees with me. My primary interest has been a foreign policy That's where I became an anarchist and have remained one. And I think the American empire and its effects on peoples throughout the world is an abomination, and I want to see it ended. Yet, I think at the same time, the agglomeration of anarchist communities in North America would need some type of national defense system, given that Europe and Asia might not go anarchist at the same time. And I'm interested in the paleoconservatives with their traditional American isolationist views, not their social views, because those are terrible. At the same time, that many anarchists are committed to that particularly don't interest me. And he's not particularly interested actually in environmentalism or marriage. And he said, lastly, we need to consider how to appeal to all those ordinary folks out there whose assistance we might need in order to achieve these kind of goals. An anarchist-led, libertarian, populist, radical, decentralized, pan-secessionist movement that appeal to the tradition and ideals of American Revolution is the only possible avenue. And what I've outlined here is essentially the same set of views promoted by Volontaire de Cleyre in her essays Anarchism Without Adjectives and Anarchism and the American Traditions. If you don't like my views, come up with a better plan of your own and let's hear the rest. Let us hear the rest. Let the rest of us hear about it. That's my answer. Sorry, that was extremely long-winded. But
That's okay. I think that
I've lived just in the 90s up till now, so yeah.
Yeah, but, so I think that I kind of took in everything that you said. You said a lot, and I think I took in everything. But if I didn't and I make a mistake here, then just let me know. The problem that I have, right, is that does sound like it would be a way to do things, but it almost sounds too good to be true, right? Because when we look at the real life versions of these sorts of systems, and there are a lot of examples, we don't end up seeing anybody being able to actually get along for more than a little while before shit completely goes to hell. Like, for instance, in China, right? The Marxist-Leninist Maoists, they're in control. They won't even let you basically say anarchism on their social media. I know this firsthand, right? They won't let you organize in large groups. They won't let you unionize in any kind of real union. And they want to own and control as much land as they possibly can, or at least as many people as they possibly can in and amongst their society. So I don't really see them just kind of sticking to their own. I see them encroaching on other places and kind of taking them over. The same sort of thing goes with the anarcho-capitalists, right? Imagine a scenario where we have an anarcho-capitalist, whatever you want to call it, village on one side, and then we have an anarcho-communist village on the other. Now, my view is that if the anarcho-communist village was to create a bunch of factories and all of those sorts of things that they need to survive, they would produce more benefit for individual people than the anarcho-capitalists village ever could, right? Because anarcho-communists, you work at a factory, right? You make whatever it is, like baking soda or something like that, right? Like, you refine baking soda in this factory. Your ability to afford all of the things you want, like your video game consoles, your couches, your nice houses, your all of those sorts of things, it's baked in. You get those things right up front, right? Just for participating in the society, you get all the benefits of that society. Whereas the anarcho-capitalist village, they only pay you a measly amount of money, right? They give you in return for your work, they pay you wages, and you might get $15 an hour, you might get $20 an hour. Those dollars would end up being able to buy you whatever it is, like a small 1-bedroom apartment. So, okay, so now we've created that situation. All of the people under the anarcho-capitalist structure are going to look at the anarcho-communist structure and be like, I really like that. I'm going to go over here instead. So they do that. And then all of a sudden, all of the anarcho-capitalists are looking and being like, holy shit, we don't have any workers anymore. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to stop all of these, the brain drain or the drain of our workers from happening and having them all go over here. Where we're going to set up walls, we're going to set up borders, we're going to put armed guards at the gate. We're not going to let anybody come through. Now it's no longer now it's no longer anarcho at all, right? These people aren't even voluntarily being able to stay, and that's the only way that they could hold on to that system. without it completely collapsing, right? Or on the other hand, let's say either one of those groups, more or less, more likely the right-wing anarchist society, they say, okay, well, we want to be able to voluntarily decide that all of the black people inside of our society don't need to be here. And there's more white people here, so we're going to kick all of the black people out and essentially, under the Geneva Convention, genocide these people by removing them in whole or in part from their homeland, right? They up and do that. And then the anarcho-communists look at that as being a fundamental injustice, and we are anti-fascist, so we arm up and we fight for the rights of those black and brown people that are being forced out, right? That's the more likely scenario, is that at the end of the day, what we're talking about here, and again, like I said, I don't think it's impossible for us to work together in short bursts, right? But the thing is that what we're talking about is essentially an issue with language, right? We're defining things that don't necessarily need to be defined in that certain way. Is anarcho-capitalism the same thing as the in anarcho-communism? The capitalists would say no, and the anarchists would also say no. So we're not actually talking about the same system. We're talking about separate systems. And when you brought up the Republicans versus the Democrats, right? The Republicans and Democrats, they are able to work together and also not necessarily get along because their values, and their material conditions and all of that are reliant on them upholding capitalism. So at the end of the day, they might fight one another, but they want the same system. But do anarcho-capitalists and anarcho-communists and Marxists want the same system at the end of the day? I would argue they don't want the same system at all. And they're so diametrically opposed to one another that I'm not sure that they would be able to function alongside one another without destroying each other.
Okay. Here's my response to that. So I would take Marxists out of the equation because Marxists are statists. They do believe in some magical, which I made the joke, like the transition period he talked about is literally like me saying, I'm going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous and then have someone bring beer every day. And somehow through that, I'll become sober. Like the transition period never works because people, even with a small amount of power, don't give it up, let alone it's like, hey, Stalin, Mao, could you give it up and give me stateless socialism? Like, yeah, we'll get right on that. So the Marxists, no, I don't think the Marxists are relying on statism. The fascists are relying on statism, and the Republicans and Democrats are relying on statism. What do we have in common? We believe in voluntary interaction and decentralization. I think anarcho-communists and CAPs would say, and here's a funny thing, they always make the opposite argument. If I was talking to one of my ANCAP friends, they say, oh, the ANCOMs are going to run out of resources. They're going to mismanage their baking factory because they don't understand Austrian economics, and they're going to come steal shit from you. So we're going to have a fight. I say, well, what if we all agreed that voluntary interaction and decentralization, which to me decentralization and bottom-up structures were in common with us, but we disagreed on how to organize that economically and in some cases socially and some lifestyle things, but we could agree on that basis. It's the same basis of Republicans and Democrats agreeing on corporatism, and it's the same basis of the elites agreeing on globalism. To me, it's the same basis of anarchists agreeing on voluntary interaction, decentralization. And I think if we have mutual aid communities, that prevents a lot of people, because if you get rid of state welfare, there will be people who need help. Well, what if the ANCAP set up private charities, and what if we set up fridges and people are utilizing that? That's a form of trade. And I agree with Frederick Bastiat. If goods don't travel across, he said borders, but if goods don't travel across communities, soldiers do. But if we have mutual aid, I think because of Proudhon's idea of mutual aid, it makes, and Kropotkin's idea of mutual aid, if we can find something to cooperate, maybe you have ANCAPs that go to the fridge, and maybe you have ANCOMs that work at a software firm for an ANCAP. So that could work.
Maybe let's bring it back down to the real life examples again, right? What do you think? And I know that some people might not think that this is a good example of anarcho-capitalism functioning in real life, but what do you think Javier Milei would say to an anarchist, to an anarcho-communist society popping up in the middle or on the outskirts of his country? Right? Do
I
you
think
think
he
that
would.
he would allow that, or do you think that he would probably not let that happen? Probably
No.
wouldn't let that happen.
What's
The
funny
the
is,
same. Just one second. Let me finish my thought. The other thing too. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong about this because it's been years since I've looked into this. But Rothbard, his early work was he was an anarcho-capitalist, and then his later work he had a transformation or a change in his belief structure, right, where he was not so much taking on that moniker anymore. Right? Do we think that Rothbard, if somebody like him were in charge of an anarcho-capitalist system in his early years or whatever, later on in life when he looks at things a little bit differently, do we think that that guy is going to allow an anarcho-communist structured society to exist? Right? I would say probably not.
probably
The same
not.
thing. The same thing goes with statists not allowing the anarchists in the Black Army to exist, right? Or basically having a an issue like the Americans also doing what they've done to Rojava and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I just don't. I fundamentally do not see in real life um, a possible scenario where all of these groups are able to sit back and work with one another without completely destroying one another because they're fundamentally at odds. And that's and to just branch off of that a little bit too, that's exactly why Democrats, Republicans, and all other modern capitalists in America and so forth don't allow any sort of autonomous regions or anarchist thought to even
Correct.
flourish in the first place, because it on its own fundamentally goes against the ideals of what do you want to even call it? What do you call that? Neoliberal capitalism, right?
Correct.
So, yeah.
Well, I don't know. To be honest, I don't. It's hard because we're speaking theory.
Yeah.
This system has never even tried before. It's not even. There's not even been a lot of pockets of ANCOM. Well, there has, but there's a lot of autonomous region. There's not a ton of, you know, I would say synergy. There's literature on it, but there's not synergy things. I think Javier Milei, my biggest problem with him is not people like, oh, is it the Israel thing? I'm like, no, that's not good. But like the Ukraine thing, I'm like, no. I'm like, actually, like deregulating the market, fine. Getting rid of government, great. But the problem is in Argentina, I will say this in Argentina, though, outside of what I think are called the Peronists, if I'm saying that correctly, there's a very strong syndicalist movement in Argentina. What I think could happen is if somebody was in an influential position to say, hey, Javier Milei, great, Viva Libertad, fight the state, but this whole, F the leftists and all this garbage, get rid of that. Stop being friends with Trump.
Mhm.
Stop being friends with Maloney. Stop being friends with Elbow Macaroni of France. And and why don't you go to your own favelas and work with the syndicalists? And then,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll be Viva Libertad Carajo, Viva Libertad Carajo, if he would work with it. But that's the problem. He's like, I'm president. He acts like a neoliberal a little bit. And then
Yeah.
he won't work with the syndicalists. I would say, look, if you're an anarchist, work with the people on the ground, work with the syndicalists. And the same thing I would say on the opposite side of Nicolas Maduro. I don't like you. You're not working. Yes, I like you opposing U.S. interests. I like the free Palestine stuff, but I don't like the Marxist Leninism stuff. That doesn't work. You have, I think it's Sekis Sola, if I'm correct. I'd have to look at anarchs, thing, liberation and action. But why don't you work with the local federations? Like, that's why I like Evo Morales. Even though he's a statist, he's like, I'm going to work with the communalists. Cool. Why don't these so-called leaders who are ANCAP or neoliberal or all these things actually get it together and work with the people on the ground and realize that the people on the ground is why they're in power anyway. Um, and that's kind of where I leave it off. Is yeah, I don't like a lot of these things. I like some of the getting rid of the government, the deregulation. That's fine. I don't want government in the way, but these people also have very problematic social views. And I don't think they're good for anarchist unity. I think they're good for temporary decentralization. And that's kind of where I'm at, where I'd like to see this work. I think it has potential to work. And I don't think we'd be like best buddies. What I think would happen is the state, everything would collapse, and then we'd run the community fridge. We'd have everything, and then the ANCAPs would be, say, you're in Manitoba or wherever. We'd run it in our municipality. The ANCAPs can run it in the city. We'd still have a mutual defense network. They can have their private police. And I just say, hey, we have a defense pact. Don't come here. Don't mess with anything. And if you need food, we'll help you. Or if we run out of food, we'll help you. Of course, I'm being over ideal. The problem is a lot of people also think that their method of anarchy is the only anarchy, or that they think hyphenated anarchy is stupid. Actually, Seca Sola is Venezuela. I got that right. So that's my thing is I don't think ANCAPs could take over a federation. If things are decentralized, I don't think ANCAPs could take over a federation. And I don't think federations could take over large ANCAP or agorist villages if people are armed. Um, I
It's the question of power, right? Like who holds the power, who has the mechanisms or the control over violence, right? The monopoly on violence. And if there is and this plays itself out in various different anarchist experiments all throughout history, whoever holds the large and socialists as well, whoever holds the largest army is usually the one that's able to win, right? When it came to the state socialists, right, they had the larger army and they were able to take out the anarchists, even though the anarchists put up one hell of a fight. And when it came to the capitalists, the neoliberal, or well, not at that point neoliberal, but to the state cap, to the bourgeois capitalists, sorry, they were able to dismantle and destroy tons of socialist experiments all over the world. And I think that that's what it really boils down to, is who has, maybe not necessarily the largest army, but who has the control over the most force, is usually the one that wins a battle. But there are, of course, ways around that. You'll see in tons of situations where guerrilla warfare, where guerrillas have gone up against large, domineering state structures, state militaries, and they've come out victorious on the other side, right? We see that a lot of in fact, we've seen that a lot of times, right? We've seen that in Vietnam. We've seen that with Afghanistan. We've seen that with a lot of different things. So, but at the end of the day, yeah, like I think that we're kind of on the same page now with this whole thing. Like, I don't really know if it would be possible for us to have a long-lasting peace. But it's definitely an interesting thought process to think, like, what is going to happen when we all get what we want, when we're able to destroy capitalism in the state? Who is the one that is going to attack first? Who is the one that's going to cause the biggest problem? How are we going to deal with our ideological opponents? And I think what comes of that is, and the anarcho-communist idea from that is, we have to make anarcho-communism a dictatorship of ideas, right? Nobody gets control over anything. The strongest idea is what comes about, right? And to do that, we have to make anarcho-communism the number one leading idea. And I think as far as that is concerned, when it comes to the ground level, just a very small number of anarchists are able to do that inside of a city. I've seen it myself with the work that I've done with my comrades. I've seen it with Cooperation Tulsa, and I've seen it again and again and again, where
What
the
if
leading idea, the leading socialist idea or the leading alternative, winds up being an anarcho-communist structured system, and an individual person, even two people, right? Two individual people, when they start working in mutual aid, when they start working with each other, they can achieve incredibly amazing things very, very quickly. And I have a ton of booklets. My associate on the other side of my curtain over here, they're actually working on putting together a large document, a large amount of documents to talk about exactly how to do that sort of thing. And it's geared towards people that are starting out for the first time. So I think at the end of the day, what I want, and possibly what you want, is to, yeah, maybe we will have to strategically align with our ideological opponents for a little while, but we have to work on making the ideals and the beliefs that we believe in the strongest be the leading ideas, right? Not through force, not through coercion, not through any of these sorts of things, so that when it comes to the point where we're all at each other's throats and we start fighting and we start taking each other down, we do succeed, right? We do wind up being the ones that win.
I have two thoughts there. So I
Sure.
agree on a lot of. So here's my thought. One, we have the internet now. So I had a friend named ANCAP there, Derek Willis, really good guy, fully ANCAP, but he's a lot more skeptical of conservatives now and the Trump movement and all that. Um, he's somewhere in the middle, I think, on Javier Milei. I have some friends who like it, but here's the thing. He used to say, ANCOMs are this, they're just broke, they're like hippy dippy dudes, they don't have all this stuff. And then he got in an X Spaces with one, because we held an X Spaces, we invited, and he came through. So he said, "Oh, you know what? I have more in common with my ANCOM friends than I do some of the statists and stuff like that." So he came around. He did. He came around. I think in the cyber world, if you have discords and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like people have to travel. Like, oh, maybe the primitivists do. Maybe even give them a discord. But look, maybe we have people intermingling in discords and like, oh, I'm an agorist. I guess I don't want to kill you. I'm an ANCAP. I guess I don't want to fight. It's a lot easier to pop in and out of a discord, with someone all the way around the world, or a Telegram, and work together on stuff voluntarily. I consider a big part of anarchism, like David Graeber says, you're an anarchist when you have a problem and you don't call the police. Well, I never called the police. So as long as no one's calling the police or threatening or actually altercations, then I think it can work. Aside from that, I'm also part of Discord servers where there is green anarchists, ANCOMs, syndicalists, agorists, subjectivists, black flags, egoists, and we have big disagreements and arguments, but we're not no one's trying to fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think in the real world, because the internet can only do so much, in the real world, I think if you use libertarian socialism if you use democratic confederalism specifically to establish certain towns with certain laws, a certain form of law, a certain form of anarchy, a certain form of way of functioning, and people agree to that, and they're not fighting their neighbors now, and they agree to this system, then through democratic confederalism and through education and people coming together and not seeing anarchy is crazy, you can have ANCAP stand next to ANCOM stand next to and Prim stand. You go hang out with the village chief for a day, and then you go work on your commune, work on your workers' co-op. And I think it would be something like Cooperation Tulsa's over here. We still have businesses functioning from the old regime, but they're now either co-ops or just independently run over here. They're not bugging anybody. Sometimes we interact, sometimes we don't, sometimes we argue, but the Cooperation Tulsa's still there, and the federations are still there. And hopefully that works. Just like they have, sorry, just like they have federations in Venezuela and Bolivia. Sorry about that. So that's how I'd like to see it. Now,
I would like to see that too. That would be neat to see, but I'm not necessarily. I'm just skeptical that it would be possible, right? But go ahead. Sorry, go on.
No, but and the biggest thing is when people say my anarchy is the only anarchy. I'm like, we can't even get all the statists to agree on one thing. Globalism has never worked. Since Alexander the Great tried it, it's never worked since. It doesn't work. And let's put everybody under one idea, one currency, one system. Doesn't work. If that doesn't work, and even nationalism has problems. You know, if you say MAGA to someone in, you know, Arizona has a completely different idea of what MAGA is in New York, even if they're Republican. So, if that is true, I do think, and again, being over idealistic here, that one anarchy, one school of thought cannot dominate everything. Not everybody will agree with Kropotkin. Not everybody will agree with Emma Goldman or Bookchin. Not everybody will agree with Rothbard or Konkin. But we can all agree that, hey, we can work together voluntarily. It should be bottom-up structures. Then we can move somewhere. So that's what I think.
Yeah, and you know what, that's fair. And I don't know if I don't know if you and me are ever going to 100% agree on that, because I'm kind of I think that my thing is that I am agnostic. How about that? I'm agnostic to the idea that we would be able to create that system.
Yeah.
Would it be a neat idea to do at the end? Yes, it might be neat. Do I want that system? Not necessarily. I want anarcho-communism to be the dominant way that people interact with one another, right? And people can call me authoritarian for wanting that, right? That's fine. It all depends on how we want to define things. But like I said, I want it to be the dominant ideology. I want it to be the way that everybody functions. And I think at the end of the day, if we are to be allowed, or if we're able to achieve a situation where we can get all of the things that we want out of life and not be coercively forced by other external entities, I think that that's the default position that a lot of people would fall into. Kropotkin talks about this a lot in Mutual Aid and in the Bread Book, right? Where the natural state of humanity and of almost all of nature is to want to cooperate with one another and want to work together with one another. And fundamentally, that is what anarcho-communism is working together with one another to have a better society, a better system, all of those sorts of things. So I'm agnostic on the idea that we can, at the end of the day, come together and actually work together on a long-term basis. And I'm not entirely sure, personally, that it is something that I would want, because when I look at my ideal society, right, I want freedom of all people, right? Freedom away from domination, freedom of expression, freedom of all of these wonderful, glorious things that were, funny enough, promised to everybody during the Enlightenment and never actually made true with liberalism. I want those things, right? And I cannot see a system where somebody is able to freely exploit the labor of another person, ever adhering to those belief structures, such as anarcho-capitalism. And I also can't see a structure where Marxist-Leninism, Maoism, in the current form that it is, would be able to function in that structure either, because it wants state control. Even though they say that it's only a temporary state control. So I don't Though I think that it would be neat to have Ancapistan and the new Soviet Union both on either side, I don't necessarily know if that's even what I want. You know, what I want is freedom for everybody. I want equality for everyone. I don't want to get bogged down with language saying that this counts as anarchism and this counts as statism and that sort of thing, because I think that that's getting too almost ahead of yourself, right? It's putting yourself out in front of your skis, because fundamentally what we want is freedom of for individuals, yes, and also freedom to be in a collective. And I don't see any other form of not democracy, any other form of economic structure actually achieving those things. Yeah, so I think that it's a neat endeavor. It's an interesting idea. Do I want to work in online syndicates with Rothbardians and fucking Marxist-Leninists and fucking Maoists and agorists and Trotskyists and everything like that to take down the current system? That sounds interesting, right? If we have to, then sure. You know, we might have to do that. Do I want it? Not necessarily, but it might be necessary. But after that, when the fucking when all of the niceties end and the rubber hits the road and our ideologies are what is actually guiding us, I think that it results in bloodshed. You know, it results in war. It results in in bad things.
That definitely could. I would say I think anarcho-communism could be definitely one of the dominant thoughts or dominant things in society. And I think through democratic confederalism, you have a local town. So you don't necessarily have to call it anything. You just say, here's my local town, here's my local laws, here's how we handle stuff locally. And if we can handle stuff from the bottom up, maybe it doesn't exactly matter what we call it. Some people might opt to use money, some people might not. And yes, some people might say, okay, this is my local Ancapistan, whatever. We voted that, democratically would do that. We voted. But I do think at the end of the day, the local level, I think democratic confederalism would be the underlying catalyst for all of it. And then things would happen differently. So I'll agree with you on that part. Democratic confederalism will be the catalyst. Then that will sprout into anarcho-syndicalism, anarcho-communism. And to be fair, I'd probably like to be somewhere like Cooperation Tulsa or working on the fridge, and then just say hi to other people and be friends with them who are not aligned with my view. Because if I ultimately believe in freedom, some people are going to disagree. Even after you get rid of Trudeau, you get rid of provincial and municipal stuff, someone will disagree. They'll say, no, I don't want to cooperate. I want to compete. Well, maybe I don't agree completely. I think competition is good in some things like sports and, sports being the main one. And maybe if you're doing something technical, coming up with ideas, there's a place for competition. There is. There'll always be some.
I agree with that. Actually, that's something that I do agree with. Like a lot of ANCOMs think absolutely no competition, and I don't think that that's necessarily a helpful idea, because I think that competition in some situations is great. Actually, like if two doctors are competing with one another to create the best possible vaccine, for instance, then I think that that's a great competition. In sports, I think that to a certain extent, some kind of competitive sports are definitely wonderful as well. Though the way that we do it right now is completely bonkers and backwards and bullshit. But there are a lot of sport competitions that I enjoy watching. Like I enjoy watching boxing. I like seeing two people use a skill that they've crafted their entire lives and being able to go into a ring with one another and see which style wins. Mixed martial arts versus boxing, so like UFC style stuff. I love that kind of thing. But when it comes to creating a structure that's based around competition like capitalism is, that's where I have the bigger problem.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree that like for a long time I used to say, no, that's not capitalism, it's corporatism. And now I'm kind of on the fact that, hey, maybe the capitalism thing leads to corporatism, and it's kind of statist. And Rothbard should have called his philosophy free market anarchism, and I would have been okay with that, which to me would be more just, hey, I created this thing. I created my pet rock. I want to sell you my pet rock. Like, okay, that's fine. Because I thought that was kind of funny. Or I created, because I do capitalist things myself. Um, I I like to trade and buy and sell meme coins. I find them hilarious. I even review them on my channel because people really want to know about them, and people in some parts of the world don't have a money system. They want to use meme coins. So I'm like, okay, cool. Meme coins are fun, and some people do really well with them. Some people lose money, but hey, um, I think there is some room for having fun in the free market. But yes, I will agree. When you create a system that says I have to get over the next person, I have to dominate them, almost kind of like a Levian, mindset of I got to get me what's mine, and if I got to get rid of the next guy to do it, I will do it. That leads to people like these technocrats who steal things, then use government protection to literally dominate the space. Then you have things like big tech, and it's not really serving most people, even though we're using it right now. I'm going to say, how's it not serving you? Because to use their platforms, I got to go do a bunch of rules, and then they're the only platforms there. Sometimes there's even no competitor in sight. It's even hard for Blue Sky to compete. So, and I think that there is good competition there, but I think Blue Sky should be able to compete with X, but it's very hard. How do you do that? So I can agree with competition there, but yeah, to create a system, I think a gift share economy is the best system. Now, I also believe in freedom. If there's no state and you say, I don't want to do a gift share economy, I want to do something different, but we're going to act peaceful towards you. And I'm going to have a mutualist community where we help each other through mutual aid and do stuff like that. Okay. Even an agorist community. So I can't say how it would look because this is all incredibly theoretical, but I'll say today's ideals are tomorrow's reality if you're working hard enough. And on the flip side, I'll say if I had to choose myself personally, where am I going to live out the rest of my days? Let's go to the next co-op. Let's go to the next co-op over. Let's improve that. Let's show people that it is a gift skill share economy is possible, and that you can run a society off the basis of each according to his ability, teach according to his needs. So yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah,
and that it was really awesome to talk to you. Learned a lot.
That was a lot of fun. I haven't had this kind of conversation in so long, so pardon me if I was a little bit rusty on stuff. But yeah, no, this is a really good time. I've never checked out your channel before, so I'm excited to see what kind of stuff that you make and produce and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, I'm really excited to see the upload when it's done and read some of the comments and that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
Because I'm going to share it with my ANCAP friends, share it with other things, share it with
For
Comrade.
sure.
If you do get Discord, let me know. And are you on Skype at all? Do you have Skype or?
I don't think I used to have Skype. I haven't done any of the, again, I haven't done any of this stuff in like 3 years, right? So I don't know if my Discord's still active. I don't think that I still have Skype, but I might on one of my old computers or something like that. But yeah. Okay, if people do want to find me though, they can check me out on Blue Sky. It's just re-ed.bsky.
Yeah. No, I've learned a ton from you. I've learned a ton from Reeducation because I was a very stubborn ANCAP. I became like an ANCAP in my early 20s. Actually,
no way.
Give you my background. I was just a young kid, doing this thing, listening to Blink 182, Sum 41 back in the day. Little kid in the early 90s. And one of my friends, I was always trying to impress my friends. I'm like, I just want to impress them. I want to be cool. Like, I'm a kid. I don't know any of these philosophies yet. Then I would always get on the phone to argue, because me and a friend listened to Blink 182, that Sum 41 was better than No Effects. And he's like, nah. this. And this is like a dial phone, so I'm holding up the thing, and my mom and dad can't talk. Like, I'm arguing. I need to win this. And one day he's like, I don't care about no effects. I'm like, Sum 41's better. He's like, Kareem, we're listening to something else now. Oh, Black Flag. I'm like, what? He's like, they hate the government. I'm like, oh, I'm like literally 9 or 10. Like, but I thought the government's good, and Bill Clinton and George Bush are, I don't. Why does Black Flag hate the government? We do the pledge. I don't want to do this. And he's like, no, come to this place called the Rally Alley. They're punks. We're going to teach you about stuff. I'm like, well, I want to impress my friends, and they're making fun of me because I'm wearing teddy bear sweaters, and I'm not like one of the cool kids, and like I'm gonna go from like I don't want to be looked at as nerdy SLC punk. I don't want to be looked at as a nerd who just plays Super Nintendo. I want to be cool. So I'm in these mosh pits. It was fun. Talking to my friends. I saw SLC punk. I'm like, okay. I saw the Casualties, Exploited. Then one band popped up, and their name was Crass, and they had a saying called "The only authority is yourself." And I had to understand, what does that mean? So I had a dial-up computer, and I'm printing out Crass lyrics. Yes, sir, I will. I'm trying to decode. I'm like, the only authority is yourself. Oh, that means like, get yourself a life, sort yourself out. The system that tells you all these external authorities exist. And they had some very profound arguments. Like, okay, well, Jesus died for your sins, but why should I spend my life for him? Because so I'm going to spend my whole life being Christian, and doing all this stuff so he can come back, but it's my life, not his. And I had the same argument for the government, that all the government does is cause wars. We can do things differently. The main architect behind that was Penny Rumbard, who I looked up, and Steve Ignorant, that I looked up, and I really understood their philosophy with my computer now. But the problem is it ended up like SLC punk. A lot of my friends who were punks had very bad issues with drugs. They had bad issues with just life issues. Anarcho-punk was cool. I like the anti-war, anti-racism, all that. I was like, F George Bush, F this war, anarchy, but wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
So I became a minarchist. And I had not a roommate, but a guy over in my dorm, and he was real cool. And we did a couple podcasts together. And he brought me on. He's like, Gary Johnson speaking, who was a libertarian presidential candidate. Brought him on Google Meet. And I asked him questions. I'm like, Gary's pretty cool, but he's like, Kareem, government has to exist in some form. Like, you're probably right. Then I found Ron Paul. I'm like, this is amazing. And I kept finding that. And then I get out of college one day, and the friend calls me back. He's like, Kareem, this guy loaded a shotgun and got arrested. He's real angry like you, and you'll like him. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name Adam Kokesh, but
no.
He had loaded a shotgun, and he had a thing called Adam versus the Man. And I'm like, wait, these left anarchists want to go run in the environment, and I just want to play computer games in my PS2, but be an anarchist. How can I do that? How can I keep my Bitcoin was around? But how can I keep all my technological toys and be an anarchist? I don't want to end up like the punks. And Kokesh said the only anarchists are anarcho-capitalists. I'm like, okay. Then I watch this guy named Jeff Berwick lives in. Here's an example of how it could work in Mexico. Anarchapulco is an anarcho-capitalist place, but the Zapatistas are also in Mexico, and they're kind of anarchists. And Chirun, which is a small town where they kicked out all the politicians, are there. So maybe it can work like something like Mexico, where these places aren't friends, but they interact. So to bring it all down, Adam Kokesh said the only anarchists are anarcho-capitalists. I said, that's what I am. I've watched enough Anarchapulco. I agree with that. I was an anarcho-capitalist for a very long. I'm like, F the left, F all this, like.
Wow.
And I was a hardcore, like Austrian, like we need the free market to do everything. The military, the free market is synonymous to almost religion. And then I wanted to see Ron Paul. He was hero to a lot of ANCAPs. Went there, had a couple drinks. They kept telling me about Michael Malice, who had a book. Now, they were just essays. One of them had Emma Goldman, and she said, there's no communism in Russia. I said, that doesn't make sense. She's a good writer, but how can you say that? That's completely untrue. So I tried to figure it out. Then one of my friends came on. Well, my co-host now came on, Jeremiah, and I had a different co-host at the time who liked my answer that, hey, during 2020, state companies that push you to take to take whatever it is are not actually capitalists or corporatists, and he liked that. And my old co-host brought on my co-host now, who said, hey, Kareem, I'm Jeremiah Harding from Jeremiah Talks. He talked to me and he said, like, you're going down a bad path. Like, you keep saying Nick Fuentes is cool and let's work with the Groypers. I'm like, yeah, they made Dan Crenshaw cry and they don't like Israel. The Groypers are cool, man. We could be friends.
Oh, no.
He's like, they're fascists. Look into Bakunin. I did. Then, last but not least, I was scrolling on one of my anarcho-capitalist friends and he said, Antifa's bad. And I'm like, yeah, these people should just stop LARPing. And when me and a guy get in a fight, Lizard Jesus. And he said, do you want to be in an anarchist coalition group on Discord? I got in. Then he said, Kareem, I know you're an ANCAP, but we have ANCAPs here and ANCOMs. I invite you to read The Conquest for Bread. And I said, yeah. And then I'm like, wait, this sounds very sensible. This sounds more sensible than, well, who's Bookchin now? Then I said, Jeremiah, you're an anarcho-pluralist. Does anybody believe this? And he said, yeah. I Googled it. Keith Preston pops up. I'm like, I'm an anarcho-pluralist. I believe in all of it. I started looking at Bookchin's work, Free Cities in the Left. I looked at Berkman's stuff after you, and then I started watching your stuff. Then I started watching
wow.
Then I started watching It Has to Be Said. Then I'm like, wait, Rojava is a good experiment. Oh, wait, Seca Sosola exists. The Zapatistas. Oh, I remember. And then everything from my past came back. I remember Monty Python. I remember Dennis. I'm an anarcho-syndicalist commune. I remember all these arguments about, hey, we can organize horizontally. I remember the Rage Against the Machine song. It's coming back around again. And this is for the people of this. And I'm like, oh, the Zapatistas. Whoa. And it came all back to me. And I'm like, maybe I was blindsided. And I really, maybe I'm a leftist.
Yeah.
I still believe and I have family from Egypt, so they were all for Palestine. They were very pro-Palestine. And so was I. And then I started a lot of these ANCAPs kind of, I saw a lot of ANCAPs that were good, but there were some, but I saw Javier Milei going very like that. And I'm like, I don't want these ANCAPs seem too statist. And the only people I saw sticking up for Palestine were, if you want to call them tankies or
oh yeah.
So the Marxists were very profound in imperialism was bad. But some of them, especially the MAGA communists, are like, well, Putin should invade Ukraine. I'm like, no. You lost the plot here. And some of them didn't agree with that, but some of them had they're like, yeah, what's going on in Palestine's terrible. But Mao was a good dude. And I'm like, no. So where do I stand now? The only people who are opposing genocide are leftists. And the only people who are past genocides and the invasion of Ukraine are other leftists on the decentralized side. And maybe, but I'm like, wait, shouldn't we have CEOs or one person to run? I'm like, no. Then I watched a documentary on the CNTFAI and I said, wait, workers would be more efficient at running the means of production, and they would be more efficient now if we got them into decentralized servers and said, screw the big thing. Okay. And then the final, nudge came in. I'm like, okay, but we still need money. We're going to all die if we don't. And I started watching your stuff and It Has to Be Said. And I'm like, maybe I'm convinced. Maybe I want to live in a gift Skillshare economy. Maybe worker co-ops are good. Maybe Noam Chomsky makes more sense in a lot of ways than a lot of people give him credit for. Like, he's just a fake intellectual. And I think Noam Chomsky said some bad things, like he supports Maduro and Putin. But like, no one's perfect. And I started binge watching Noam Chomsky, and I said, you know what? I want to talk to more leftists. I'm going to reach out to some of the biggest creators. Maybe we didn't get off on the best foot because I said I believed in private property. Maybe I'll come back and say, hey, I get where you're saying private property synonymous with state control property that Proudhon was talking about. But I wonder if Corey Johnston will have me on. He did. So I got on the Skeptical Leftist. I said, I really love Aaron's content. I've watched a ton of this, how anarcho-communism works. I've watched the stuff on the fridge. I think he's funny with the Sizzler. You know, these kids don't want to get a job. And
that was such a stupid line. I thought that barely made it into the video.
And Comrade Brett had told me about Black Bloc, and I'd seen that. And I'm like, well, if Elon can endorse the ADL, I'll endorse people who put on Black Bloc in Europe. Checkmate.
Wow.
So I'm like, but I like the idea of Black Bloc. How are you going to resist tyrants like Macron, the ADL? How are you going to resist the German government, the British government, all that stuff? Are you going to like Jeremy Corbyn, or are you going to go Black Bloc? And, you know, and I'm like, oh, he has a video on Black Bloc. Like, nice. Aaron really knows it. I don't know, he's in Canada. He had a video about the, you know, learning about gun safety and stuff. I'm like, this is excellent stuff. And yeah, I believe in freedom, but if I had to pick, yes, I do hope more people adopt, let's say, libertarian socialist ideals and see it as first a viable thing that it does exist. And it has existed since France, synonymous with anarchists. And even more so, they adopt different methods of it. All the way from, and I'm not going to say which one is the best because that's hard too. Just like ANCAPs are broken, I would break them up into Rothbardians, left Rothbardians, and Hoppians. I would say libertarian socialism could extend to anarcho-communists, anarcho-syndicalists, mutualists, platformists. I think there's one called Especifismo, which I'm not 100% sure. And synergy.
Check it out. That's the model that Co-opt also uses, and we've actually adopted a lot of their ways of doing things as well. It's fantastic. It's really, really clever.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, it's almost like democratic confederalism, but it's kind of a little bit more well-rounded. It kind of has a few more things figured out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So right now I'm in the process of just saying, hey, I'm going to make enough YouTube videos to make a little bit of money a month, because money still is a thing. Once I can get over the 5-6 grand mark, I'm going to dedicate my time to my family, friends, helping the community, and to promoting these ideals. So and I'm still part of the Libertarian Party, but I think I can bring them around to be like, hey, these leftist ideas, especially democratic confederalism, egalitarianism, mutual aid, and working from the bottom up and cooperation are the most important things to actually move civilization forward, not just pushing for profit, not just pushing for competition. So yeah, that's my story. That's how I got from here to there.
I love that story. That's an awesome story.
Branding.
Yeah. I love that story. That is, and it's very. I appreciate it so much that you would say that some of the work that I did affected you in some way. And the thing that I always tell people is that it wasn't me that did anything. I simply just told you stuff that was written down in a book 100 years ago. It's 100% all you, man, and you fucking did it, and I love that, and I love you for it. And if you think that you can get through to the people in whatever organization that you're in, and get them to go in a more whatever you want to call it, socially libertarian kind of way, that would be fantastic. And if you can't, I have all kinds of booklets and bullshit that I can send to you, and you can start working on something yourself, or start working with another group that's local in your city or town or whatever. And I think that we'll do it. I think that I think that the idea, that's the thing. I think that the ideas are so strong that I constantly, in my mentions and in my DMs and everything like that, I have former Marxist-Leninists and former Rothbardians and ANCAPs and mutualists and literally everything under the sun. And they all come to me and say, I believed a certain thing for for many, many years, but I've seen that this actually works on the ground. I've seen your people that are just like you actually going out and doing stuff, and it makes a fundamental change in society. And I want to do that too. Like even my own even people in my own family have come to me and been like, I thought that you're on some shit. Like when you first started telling me all this crazy stuff that you believed, I thought that you were nuts.
How do
But
you
now that
not
I look at the stuff that yeah, they were like, fuck, crazy. But now that I've seen the stuff that you have been able to do with your organizations and stuff, and see that people are actually getting fed and stuff, I think that that's the right way to go. And
Yeah.
I think that it is too, obviously. That's why I dedicated my life to it. So whenever I meet somebody like you, I absolutely wanted to talk to you because I think that that journey is so important. And I think that getting these ideas out to to diverse and niche communities is really, really important. And yeah, maybe hopefully we can make our ideals a leadership of ideals, and maybe one day we'll even be able to convince some liberals. Who
Yeah.
knows? Crazier things have happened.
I've got some liberals on the side. I've got some MAGA people on the side. Funny enough,
Oh no, I'm just being facetious.
it's funny. All my left libertarian friends are like, yeah, and the Fed, and the Fed. I'm like, yeah, and the Fed. And I posted your video, abolish money, and they're like, whoa, like that's fucking, that's fucking great
That's a
insanity.
bridge too far. We can't talk about that.
I'm like, you want to end the Fed? I'm showing you a way to end the Fed, and you don't have
Yeah,
legislation to do it. They're like, whoa. I'm like, me and Aaron agree taxation is theft, but
yeah.
like, oh, but we'll all starve. How do you communicate subjective value quickly? I'm like,
Holy
uh,
fuck.
you can still
That is
do
the
it.
one thing that I will say about anarcho-capitalists and mutualists and stuff like that is and is that they are some of the deepest thinkers when it comes to this stuff, and how well read so many of them are.
Yeah, they're really good.
It's upsetting to me that they end up going into the direction that I disagree with, and that's fine. 15 people can read the exact same book and walk away with 15 different perceptions on it. But that is something that I've always admired about them, is that they do go deep into those kinds of things, and they're not afraid to read, and they're not afraid to to have critical analysis of their own systems. They're not afraid to take a look at the things that they believe and think in a different way. And I think that's why I've seen so many of them move from with exactly the path that you've gone on, from wherever it is, from being a conservative to a libertarian to being more anarcho-capitalist or minarchist or whatever, and they eventually end up making it over to this side. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them do, and I think that that's awesome. And it's something that I don't see in a lot of other ideologies. It's something that I certainly don't see with Marxist-Leninists, as much as I think that some of them are wonderful and that they are well read. They only stick to what the reading that they stick to is only of their ideology, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
If they don't branch out and they don't read things that go against their ideology, then they're never going to learn a different way. They're never going to see that they were wrong. So yeah, so that is one good thing that I can say about the right leaning libertarians.
Yeah, no, they're great, and that's why I really like a lot of the right-leaning libertarians. They'll watch this whole thing, they'll critique it, they'll break it down. A lot of Marxist-Leninists are like, no, Marx and Engels said this. They are akin to a religious figure, and that's the same problem with the MAGA movement. Well, I get people like, well, I didn't really agree with this, but Trump wants it, so let's do it. I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. And same thing with the liberals. Vote blue no matter who. I'm like, okay. So if they commit genocide, like somebody recent, it's vote blue no matter who. Vote blue no matter who. It's just like they're supporting indirectly the most egregious human action, but you're just gonna like vote blue no matter who. Democrats are always better. I'm like, oh my God. How?
That's why I made the joke. Hopefully one day we can convince some liberals. But that's like half joking, fully earnest, right? I feel like Liberals are literally, and I've been doing this a while, for a minute now. They are the hardest to convince of
I
any
would
other
look,
ideology. I get conservatives on my side faster than I get liberals on my side, which really boggles my fucking mind because we're like 99% of the way, 98, 95, okay, around 80% of the way there with the liberals, right? But they won't go that extra
yeah,
20%, where I can just walk up to a random conservative and I can say, hey, the whatever it is, the billionaires are bad. Here's 19 different reasons why they're bad, and they're right on board with it.
they're like,
I,
yeah,
I've had countless conservatives join up with my organization, start off as conservatives, walk out as anarcho-communists. And I don't know, maybe, and like that was the journey that I went on too, right? Like I was a conservative at one point. A lot of my fellow comrades were conservatives at one point, because we had that hatred and that disdain uh, for like structured hierarchical control. And I think that that's the thing that conservative media and politicians really tap into with those people, is that inherent hatred of dominance. Right.
yeah,
Some end up being obviously far more dominant when you enter into the religious aspects and stuff like that. But when it comes to the libertarians and to a lot of different conservatives, they don't like control. They don't like being controlled.
yeah. I don't want them
Some
to
of
tell
them.
like a
Yeah.
lot of them are like, I don't want them to tell me what to. I don't want Fauci to do it. I want this. I want.
Exactly. Yeah. It ends
Sometimes
up,
they
and I'm not going to say that the pendulum doesn't swing the entire other way, and a lot of them don't turn to you and eventually say, "I don't want to be controlled by anybody, but I want to control everybody." That
yeah.
absolutely happens too. But I
No,
think with your common everyday normie that just doesn't really know much about politics and they happen to watch Fox News, those kind of people like that, they're ripe for being able to be convinced of a better solution. Right.
similar.
Whereas when it comes to liberals, they think that they've got it all figured out and they're just going to condescend to you and laugh at you and they're not going to listen to you.
You know,
So,
there's a YouTuber I like though that I do feel does that to a certain extent. I'm not attacking anybody here, but it'd be cool. I was thinking of making another channel called Spontaneous Minds where I break down some anarchist knowledge. Hopefully, I'm ready for that. I'm eventually
mhm.
going to start to explain mutualism. But I'd really love to get contrapoints to see, like, hey, actually voting Democrat doesn't do shit. It's terrible. They lie to
Good luck.
you. They lie to you. They don't care about trans people. They use them as a bargaining chip. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
like, cool. I have a trans friend. I'm not, a bad dude. I'm the resistance. Like, fuck off.
Like,
So
here's the thing. I like ContraPoints' work. I think that she does a lot of great work on getting people to understand that gender and sexuality are different things, and normalizing that sort of thing, all of that. But when it comes to her liberal ideology, I don't think when somebody's paycheck is reliant on them believing something, it's real hard for them to be able to believe something other than that because it's going to take away from their bottom line. And as far as I'm concerned, that's where ContraPoints is on a lot of that stuff. You're never going to be able to convince her, at least I don't think, that leftism is the right way to go because she's getting paid by liberals to say the liberal thing. So
yeah,
that's my opinion on it anyway.
and that's the same with Hassan Piker. I'm sure Hassan Piker is getting his checks, and I'm sure another
Perhaps.
another person who, and this is why I think thinking critically is good. Another person who would technically be on my team, identifies with my team, is Vaush, but I just don't. Something about Vaush I am not crazy about. I don't feel
Yeah,
good debate.
I'm not even gonna breach that subject. I've had enough. I've had my fill. I'm full. I don't need to eat anymore.
But and one thing that killed me is because people keep saying bread tube. I'm like, is bread tube something after Peter Kropotkin? I'm like, well, why
Yeah,
it is? I said, okay, bread tube's a good idea. And then I'm like, who are the big creators on bread tube? I'm like, ContraPoints. Okay. I'm like, Hassan Piker. I'm like,
yeah.
Hassan Piker's kind of like Democrat light. And I'm like, okay, who else do we got? I'm like, Vouch. I'm like, okay, who else? I'm like, oh, Anarch. Woo.
Mhm,
I'm like,
mhm.
I'm like, okay, re-education, like, nice. Like, I need to. I want to make BreadTube anarchist again. Like,
Yeah. Make
I
bread
don't.
to anarchist again. We need hats.
And also, the last thing I'll say is what drove me crazy is during the election.
Mhm.
I'm not a Kamala Harris fan. But people always conflate constantly. They do it all the time, more so than any conflation ever. They're like, every liberal's a leftist just because they're like you could be like, yeah, I think healthcare should be done through mutual aid. It's like leftists. It's like, I think something different than what like leftists. Everything's leftist. I'm like, there's a huge difference. Liberals love capitalism, and they're harder to convince, as I said, in most cases, than your average, than anyone, because they, I think, do have the, like, well, my professor said, my it's like they have a Slavoj Žižek type thing where, like, I have to be
Yeah.
right. And people conflate leftists and liberals all the time, every day, like every day on X, more than anything else I've seen. Oh, well, he's I'm like, and Kamala Harris was apparently a communist. I'm like, my God, that is furthest thing from the truth. Like, that's like literally calling a watermelon a bicycle. What?
Yeah.
Where? Because her dad studied Karl Marx somewhere. That, like, okay, my dad studied physics. Am I a physicist? I'm not. I barely pass calculus too. I'm good with computers though, but that was the thing that drove me crazy. I'm like, and there are
Oh
people
yeah.
like Kamala, like Kamala. I'm like, she's a neoliberal. She's basically like Biden. She doesn't accept. She has no policy positions, and she's not a communist. And you're
Mhm.
misrepresenting what. And I feel communism gets misrepresented because people think that something slightly neoliberal, like a neoliberal that, I don't know, wants to help the environment, is um, is a communist. And I'm
Mhm.
not an environmentalist because they destroy that, because they have these Davos meetings, and I'm like, bro, I don't care about that. I care
Right.
about ecology, restore the grass, restore the water.
Yeah.
The same friend who told me about Nick Fuentes said lawns are statist. I'm like, get out of here. That's the stupidest thing I've
They
ever
said
heard.
what?
Lawns are statist.
Lawns are statist. Okay.
Then I thought about it, and I looked at the history, and I saw rich people
It's
had
not
lawns
wrong.
to prove that they could eat without, growing food. I said,
Yeah.
no, I need to get little plants and grow. Oh my God, we could all have food if mutual aid. We could all have mutual aid if we
Mhm.
grew. How did this happen? Oh, it was a rich person thing, but it was a bourgeois or bougie, as they say, thing to have a
Yeah.
lawn. Now, do I still have a lawn? Yes. Have I
Right.
grown like 4 or 5 plants? Yes. Um, I don't know. It's just like a lot of things. I had to retrain and look at history and say, like, hey, this was a good idea. Um, this was a bad idea that I had. And it's kind of
Yeah.
funny how some things at first knee jerk reaction, like, that's not capitalism. Lawns are fine. Like, we need money. Well, you have to have a CEO. You have to have a boss.
Man, there's a reason why my channel's called Re-Education. Like,
I got me.
it was a joke at first, like it was just me kind of like memeing and like being like silly, like, yeah, ooh, scary communism, ooh, re-education camps. But no, it's like it's actually true. Like, we need to relearn a lot of the bullshit that we just inherently just took as truth and gospel for like our entire lives.
And that's been my problem is it really took a lot of effort to retrain that. Now,
Yeah.
I'm also the fact, if someone disagrees on some things, that's fine. Like, if you want to have a yard and and that's your thing,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, have a yard. I don't think it's great. If you don't believe in social ecology, fine, but don't go destroying the environment, or don't
No,
destroy
exactly. Yeah.
people's property. And also another thing was, um I debated a lot of ANCAPs on this Liquid Zulu, my friend, which I'm still friends with, um, my friend Jack. The biggest thing is, they said ANCAPs will say collective property doesn't work because only like, you can't use, if I'm using this chair right now, the scarcity of the chair has been taken by me sitting in it.
Okay.
And what I would say, what I came to rationalize is, yes, this chair's in my house. I can sit in it at one time, but someone else in my house can sit in it. But the big thing is, it's not, this chair is exclusively in my house. But there's nothing stopping me from wheeling out the chair, putting it into a library and saying, hey, other people can use this now. It's a community chair. Oh,
Sure, why not?
it's not personal property. It's public/use-of-fruct property.
Mm-hmm.
So they make a thing to say, like, okay, if I have a computer and someone remotes in it, is that still your property? Yeah, that's still your property. But if I take computers to a library and say this is for common use, and there's a time limit on it, which is what my public library in Pittsburgh does, that's public. So I do believe you can. And there's things like the commons. I do argue water is a right. Now, you can't have collective ownership. I don't think it's a contradiction. And that's one big thing they've argued, that no, not to say that, and they're still really good. They still read tons of theory. Some of them are smarter than me, I'm sure. But I am not convinced that collective ownership cannot exist for the reason I told you. You can have exclusive access to things, and that is in an ANCAP society, your private property, and ANCOM society, that's your personal property, things you have exclusive access to. But the things you utilize together, without mutual, if you want, without it, or I shouldn't say mutual, without explicit consent, are public. I don't have to go and particularly say to the library computer, I want to use this. But if someone comes in my house and wants to use my personal computer, they need my permission. And I think that's the fundamental distinction. And I've probably thought these things through way too much. I should probably make a separate channel explaining this stuff. If anybody would watch it, that would be cool.
That would be cool, yeah.
All right.
I think that we should probably hold her there, and if you want to have a conversation later, we probably can. But it's just about 11 o'clock here, so I haven't even eaten dinner, so I gotta go do that.
I'm sorry, Aaron.
No worries. It was really fun to talk to you, Kareem. It was a really good time.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. I will be emailing you, and I will send you a link on Tuesday to our Skype thing if you want to join. It's a Skype link if you want to install that, or you can do it through your browser. And that's where we and a bunch of other leftists and anarchists discuss current events. So I'll invite you to that. Aaron, it was a pleasure. And go check out his channel, Reeducation. Absolutely amazing. Love this, and we're definitely doing it again.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you later. Have a great night.